Chapter 763. Just as Ouyang Shuo was in a dilemma, the secretary by Nanpu walked in and bowed. Reporting to the emperor, Lu Bu, Gao Shun, and Chun Gong are outside the hall requesting an audience. Ouyang Shuo was startled, not expecting Lu Bu to be so impatient. He raised his head and said, "Please wait a moment." "Yes." Bai Nanpu turned and left. Seeing this, Qingyi stood up and said, "Why don't we talk next time? I'm fine as I am." She was a considerate girl. Ouyang Shuo saw Bai Nanpu and suddenly had a flash of inspiration. "Are you willing to do administrative work?" Qingyi didn't react. Ouyang Shuo's thoughts became clearer. "I have to deal with many memorials and work late into the night every day. If someone were to help sort out the memorials and paste their opinions on how to deal with them when necessary, it would greatly increase my efficiency in reviewing the memorials. Are you willing to do such a job?" Seeing Bai Nanpu, Ouyang Shuo suddenly remembered that Bai Nanpu, as a secretary, was more or less a chief official of a department. In modern society, Jia Su, the chief historian of the protectorate, was equivalent to the secretary-general, while Bai Nanpu, the secretary, was the head of the general office. What Ouyang Shuo lacked now was a full-time secretary. Qingyi was undoubtedly a suitable candidate. Although she was young, she had a rare steadiness. She had trained by Bai Hua's side for so long and could be considered proficient in government affairs. What was even more difficult was that Qingyi had a clever mind. Qingyi also understood. This was a position that combined the functions of a modern secretary and an ancient grand secretary. It didn't look conspicuous, but it allowed her access to the highest secrets of the territory. She could play the role of a think tank and draft opinions on some memorials in advance, reducing Ouyang Shuo's workload. In ancient times, this was called a draft, a symbol of the cabinet's power. Speaking of this, one had to talk about the cabinet system in ancient times. The cabinet system was formed in the Ming dynasty. At first, Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang used the Hu Weiyong case to abolish the Hall of Governmental Affairs and the Prime Minister in one fell swoop. The power of the Hall of Governmental Affairs was given to the 6 ministries, and the Emperor was directly in charge of the affairs of the 6 ministries and the 100 ministries. In fact, this was equivalent to holding the post of Prime Minister, expanding the monarch's arbitrary power to the peak. As a result, the centralization of power was achieved, but the emperor himself was miserable. He had to work overtime every day. When there were so many memorials, the emperor would even have to stay up all night. Even a stubborn emperor like Zhu Yuanzhang could not withstand it. What should he do? He could only look for a few senior elders to help him deal with it. These people were the Grand Scholars or the Grand Scholars. However, the Grand Scholars only had the right to make suggestions, but not the right to make decisions. They all had the title of Grand Scholar, but their official positions were pitifully low, so they couldn't exercise any power at all. During the reign of Emperor Zhu Di of the Ming dynasty, the cabinet system officially took shape. After the establishment of the cabinet, the decision-making power originally held by the Prime Minister was firmly held in the hands of the Emperor. The power of discussion was divided to the cabinet, and the executive power was divided to the 6 ministries. At this time, the cabinet was still only the Emperor's private secretary, not an organ of power. After the middle period of Yongle Kingdom, the power of the cabinet gradually increased. It was in charge of the ministers of the 6 ministries and became the highest advisor and decision-making body of the emperor. During the reign of Emperor Xuanzong of the Ming dynasty, Zhu Zhanji, the authority of the Ming dynasty began to rise, forming a more complete administrative process. All the memorials, big and small, and even the suggestions of the common people to the emperor, were gathered by the Office of Transmission. The Office of Rights reported to the emperor, and then handed over to the cabinet. The cabinet was responsible for drafting opinions, and then the Office of Rights submitted the opinions to the emperor for approval. Finally, the 6 ministries collated and issued the opinions. In this way, the Cabinet's power to draft and the Office of Rights' power to approve combined to form a complete chain of power. The Cabinet's cooperation with eunuchs allowed them to wield great power and control the 6 ministries. The most famous of these was the union between Zhang Jiuzheng and the chief eunuch Feng Bao. In the Middle and Late Ming dynasty, although the grand scholars of the cabinet did not have the title of prime minister, they actually had the power of a prime minister. The prime minister system that Zhu Yuanzhang had painstakingly abolished appeared on the stage of history in another form. When Shanghai City was established, it was necessary to establish a cabinet above the 4 general bureaus. The only problem was how to operate it so that it could improve administrative efficiency and prevent the cabinet from abusing power. This was a big problem. During this transitional period, Qingyi's position was equivalent to an outpost. Qingyi was a smart person. He knew the weight of this, but he hesitated. "I'm afraid I can't?" Ouyang Shua smiled. "You can't? Then it's fine." "All right, I'll give it a try." Qingyi nodded. "That's more like it." Ouyang Shua thought very highly of Qingyi, this female Zhuge. Violet looked at Ouyang Shua warily. "Hey, you're not thinking of recruiting Qingyi as your female secretary, are you?" What else could Ouyang Shua say to this enchantress? Qingyi blushed when she heard this. "Let's call it a day." "I still have to see Lu Bu," Ouyang Shua said. "Qingyi, stay here for a while." "All right." Qingyi nodded. She was now officially on the job. Ouyang Shua already had a plan for the arrangement of Lu Bu and the other 2. This also involved the restructuring of the general bureaus of military affairs. Since Lu Bu had taken the initiative to see him, Ouyang Shua called for Du Ruhui and Zhao Kuo, the 2 big shots of the general bureaus of military affairs, and held an impromptu meeting in the study. After a while, Du Ruhui and the others arrived in the study. One of them was 10 feet tall, with a broad waist and a dignified appearance. His face was like jade and he looked majestic. It was Lu Bu Lu Fengxian. At first glance, he looked like a peerless general. Lu Bu's bravery was not limited to the 3 kingdoms. Even in the entire history of China, only a few people could match him. Even Eli, Su Chu, and Ma Chao could not compare to him. Behind Lu Bu was a broad-faced man with a full beard. At first glance, he looked a little dull. Needless to say, he was a loyal and skilled soldier, Gao Shun. Next to Gao Shun was a scholar in Chinese. He had the same broad face and a righteous expression. It was Chen Gong. "Greetings, Emperor." Lu Bu, Gao Shun, and Chen Gong bowed formally, establishing their relationship as emperor and minister. After staying in Shanghai City for a while, even someone as arrogant as Lu Bu was willing to submit to him. Nothing could be better than serving in such a territory. "Everyone, please rise," Ouyang Shua said as he looked at the 3's attributes. Name: Lu Bu, Emperor. Tier: Dynasty, Late Eastern Han Dynasty. Identity: Shanghai City. General. Occupation: Special Class General. Loyalty: 70 Commander, 72 Force, 100 Intelligence, 65 Politics, 50 Specialty. Fierce General. Increases troop morale by 30, increases troop movement speed by 25, increases troop attack power by 35. Martial Arts: Sky-splitting halberd technique, total of 24 techniques. Equipment: Red Rabbit Horse, Heavenly Halberd, Beast Face Head Swallowing Chain Armor. Evaluation: Lu Bu has the courage of a tiger, but not the strategy of a hero. He is cunning and only cares about benefit. Lu Bu's strength was 100, and his combat power was off the charts. Ouyang Shua thought to himself, if he were to fight with Lu Bu right now, it would be difficult for him to win. Name: Gao Shun. King level. Dynasty: Late Eastern Han Dynasty. Identity: Shanghai City. General. Occupation: Advanced General. Loyalty: 70 Commander, 88 Force, 72 Intelligence, 60 Politics, 45 Specialty. Soldier Training: Increases troop level, increases troop speed by 40, increases troop morale by 15. Special Unit. Rank Breaking Camp. Martial Arts: slight equipment, six-faced Han's sword evaluation. Shun is pure and dignified. He does not drink alcohol and does not accept gift. His 700 soldiers are divided into 1,000 people. Their armor and fighting equipment are all refined and tidy, and they are invincible. They are called the rank-breaking camp. Gao Shun had indeed brought Ouyang Shua a pleasant surprise. Not only did he have the special unit, rank-breaking camp, but his specialty, soldier training, was even more heaven-defying. It could save him half the training time. Ouyang Shua would definitely put Gao Shun in an important position. Name: Chungong, King Level, Dynasty. Late Eastern Han Dynasty, Identity. Shanghai City Councilor, Occupation, Superior Counselor Loyalty. 75 Commander, 70 Force. 52 Intelligence. 85 Politics. 72 Specialty, Winning. Increases the success rate of strategy by 25, increases the grasp of battle opportunities by 20, reduces the enemy's morale by 10. Evaluation. Chungong's intelligence is comparable to Cao Cao's, but he cannot use it. He has not reached the point of being a god. Compared to Jia Su, Chungong was not as good, but he could be considered a top-notch counselor. Qingyi had just arrived and had to attend such an important event, so she couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Seeing how Ouyang Shua had easily subdued an emperor-level historical general, a king-level historical general, and a king-level counselor, she couldn't help but feel sad for the other lords. Other than the feudal lords, the wilderness lords would probably wake up laughing even in their dreams if they could gather these three people. In contrast, in Shanghai City, they had come uninvited. The difference between them was too great to measure. If they were in any other territory, if they could gain the loyalty of these three people, they would immediately be treated as guests of honor. They would be afraid of neglecting them in the slightest. But right now, Lu Bu and the others had taken the initiative to meet him, but Ouyang Shua had directly ignored them. Even if he met them, he didn't meet them one by one. Instead, he entered a state of discussion as soon as he arrived. This could be considered as neglecting them, but Lu Bu and the others didn't have a trace of dissatisfaction on their faces. After entering, they kowtowed without any reluctance, let alone anger. Even a peerless general like Lu Bu didn't have any arrogance when he saw Ouyang Shua. He was very respectful. This was the difference. The current Ouyang Shua had the majesty of an emperor. How could an ordinary lord compare to him? In the eyes of Lu Bu and the others, the lord in front of them was a true lord. They wouldn't look down on him just because he was a mutant. Chapter 764. In the study, the military conference officially began. Ouyang Shua had summoned Du Ruhui and Zhao Kuo to discuss Gao Shun's arrangements. There is a vacancy in the general administration of military affairs. We lack a department in charge of the daily training of the army. My intention is to establish a training department under the general administration of military affairs to lead the daily training of the army. What do you think? Ouyang Shua asked. Du Ruhui was the first to speak. I agree with the emperor's suggestion. As the scale of the army continues to expand, war is no longer the norm, and non-war is the norm. As such, the daily training of the army becomes more and more important. It can even be said to be the lifeline of the army's overall combat power. Setting up an exclusive department is appropriate. Yes. I suggest that the recruitment and management of the reserve forces should be placed under the newly established training department. That way we can lead the training from the very beginning, Zhao Kuo suggested. Since the two leaders of the General Administration of Military Affairs had expressed their opinions, the others naturally had no say. Ouyang Shua smiled and nodded. Zhao Kuo's suggestion is very good. Let's do that. As for the director of the training department, General Gao Shun will be appointed. I wonder if the general is willing? As he spoke, Ouyang Shua looked at the broad-faced general. Gao Shun's soldier training specialty was practically made for the training department. Ouyang Shua could not think of a more suitable candidate than Gao Shun to lead the department. Everyone's eyes were focused on Gao Shun. Gao Shun had a vague premonition that things would come to this, but he was calm at this point. He had just arrived and was given an important position. This was a treatment that Gao Shun had never received under Lu Bu's command. More subtly, whether it was unintentional or intentional, Gao Shun's position had been arranged even earlier than Lu Bu's. Gao Shun noticed that Lu Bu's expression changed. He was a man who did not hide his thoughts well. After entering the wilderness and arriving at Shanghai City, his relationship with Lu Bu would probably come to an end. For some reason, Gao Shun felt a little melancholy. However, the lord before him had an extraordinary breadth of mind and bearing. An ordinary lord could not hope to match him. Gao Shun stood up and walked to the center of the hall. He bowed and said, "Thank you for your kindness. I dare not do my best." His tone was sincere and his expression was solemn. "Good, then it's settled." Ouyang Shua smiled. Indeed, Gao Shun was the main character of this military conference. As for Lu Bu and Chun Gong, Ouyang Shua had also made arrangements for them. Lu Bu continued his training in the 6th Division's Martial Hall. After the Yunnan War, he would definitely be promoted to a division general. Chun Gong's position in the Southern Border Protectorate was equivalent to Jia Su's second-in-command. When Shanghai City was established, there were no pure strategists under the framework of the imperial court. Instead, the imperial court arranged posts for people, not for people. Chun Gong's current arrangement was just a temporary measure. Ouyang Shua had also thought of transferring Chun Gong to the army as a strategist. Unfortunately, the commanders of the four armies were all extremely intelligent people, and their strategies were no less than those of Yuchen Palace. If he really arranged for Chun Gong to go there, it would be inappropriate. There was something special about the Three Kingdoms era. The feudal lords fought for hegemony, and there were endless chaotic battles. It was only during the end of the Three Kingdoms that the Qing dynasty officially established a nation. Only in this way could there be an active stage for strategists. This kind of strange profession and ecology was very rare in other dynasties. When everything was settled, it was already close to noon. At around 2 in the afternoon, Ouyang Shua reappeared in the study room. As soon as he sat down, Black Snake walked in. It seemed that he was directly guarding outside the door. In the morning, some officials, including the presidents of the Chamber of Commerce, waited in the reception room for 3 to 4 hours, but did not see Jun Shang. Black Snake was desperate. He didn't leave at noon and directly waited outside the courtyard. Seeing Black Snake, Ouyang Shua smiled helplessly. "You guys are really going to keep me in the study room?" "Jun Shang, please forgive us." Ouyang Shua waved his hand. "All right. Say it, what's the matter?" "It's like this. Didn't Jun Shang previously order to find a guild called Liangshan Mercenary Group in Xuanzhou? We've already found it, and we've already arranged for people to smoothly infiltrate it." Black Snake replied. Ouyang Shua was startled. His expression instantly became a little dazed, and his voice was ethereal. "Really? It's a coincidence. Jun Shang, guess what? That Liangshan Mercenary Group is still on the list of applications to enter Shanghai City. Because the conditions of the guild are good, the Civil Affairs Bureau in charge of the review has already passed the preliminary examination. If there are no accidents, the entire guild will move to Shanghai City." Black Snake said another piece of information. This was probably the reason why Black Snake was in a hurry to report to Ouyang Shua. Black Snake couldn't guess what kind of entanglement the Jun Shang had with this inconspicuous Liangshan mercenary group. Logically speaking, one was a high and mighty great duke, and the other was an inconspicuous small character in Xuanzhou City. There shouldn't be any intersection between the two. As the head of intelligence, Black Snake instinctively felt that there was a great secret, but he didn't dare to take a step forward and really investigate the inside story. If he did that, it was tantamount to seeking his own death. Not to mention other things, just the commander of the Shanghai Guards, Shun Buhai, was not a simple character. Recently, Black Snake faintly felt that there was a pair of eyes silently watching their scolatory manner in the dark. If he really wanted to investigate, he couldn't find any clues. Black Snake was sure that the Black Snake Guards were definitely being watched by the Shanghai Guards. As the elite of China's international mercenary group, Black Snake considered himself to be the top elite in intelligence investigation and anti-investigation. Against the ancient people, it was even more so. Who would have thought that Shun Buhai would teach him a good lesson? Although intelligence investigation in modern society was more scientific and more systematic, it was not omnipotent. In addition, there was no advanced equipment in the wilderness, so it was even more difficult to deal with. It was equivalent to cutting off one's own arm. The wisdom of the ancient people was endless, and some of their experience in investigation was passed down from generation to generation. These experiences would never appear in any written information, but they really existed. Not to mention other things, just the methods of training and controlling spies were unimaginable and varied. Accumulated over generations, it was very terrifying. If modern people really looked down on them, they would probably suffer a great loss. Black Snake obviously suffered such a loss, and from then on, he acted more and more cautiously. Of course, in secret, Black Snake also strengthened the transformation of the Black Snake Guards. He was not willing to be suppressed by the Shanghai Guard. Not to say fighting for power, but at least fighting for pride. The competition between the two major intelligence agencies had just begun. Naturally, Ouyang Shuo was well aware. Shun Buhai had already told him that the Shanghai Guards had now achieved full coverage of the territory, officially weaving a boundless net. Ouyang Shuo was even more happy to see the competition between the two major intelligence agencies. Black Snake's report made Ouyang Shuo realize that the time to completely solve the problem of the Liangshan mercenary group had come, and he could not delay it any longer. To what extent has the Black Snake Guards infiltrated the Liangshan mercenary group? Ouyang Shuo asked. Black Snake replied, the Liangshan mercenary group is just a large guild, and the number of members has not reached the limit of 10,000. As for the branch, there is not a single one. The guild adopts the system of leader responsibility, and the main profit comes from completing missions or accepting missions. Other than the leader, Song Pu, there are two deputy leaders. They are Yi Zhongqing and Zhang Ziyue, whom the emperor mentioned. A few days ago, the top snake guard number 55 has been successfully promoted to the position of deputy leader. In addition, there are a few snake guards and black guards hiding in the elite group. The efficiency of the Black Snake Guards was really high. In such a short time, they had already infiltrated the core of the Liangshan mercenary group. What does number 55 think of the core members? Ouyang Shuo also wanted to know if the game trajectory of the three brothers and sisters in this life had changed. If that was really the case, he didn't know how to deal with it. Leader Song Pu is a general. He handles matters fairly, and he is warm-hearted. He is very popular in the mercenary group. In the Chuanzhou mercenary group circle, he is considered a little famous. Black Snake first explained Song Pu's situation. When Ouyang Shuo heard that, he sneered in his heart. Yes, before that incident happened in the previous life, wasn't Song Pu such a good brother? He was eager for justice and took good care of the brothers in the group. He didn't neglect anyone. Song Pu also took good care of the families of the members. Every month, he would allocate a portion of the mercenary group's limited funds to help the families of the members, especially the elderly, pay the rent for them. Because of this, people in the circle often said that although the Liangshan mercenary group was not a powerful mercenary group, it was the most humane mercenary group in Chuanzhou City. With this good reputation, the mercenary group could also receive some mercenary missions and barely maintain operations. However, although Song Pu was warm-hearted, he had no business sense, and there was nothing remarkable about his communication with the outside world. Because of this, the mercenary group's financial situation had not been good. If not, as the third in command of the mercenary group in the previous life, Ouyang Shuo would not have been in such a miserable state. In the later stages of the game, with inflation, property prices in the capital rose, making it harder for players to live in the capital. Some of the elderly did not have any skills and were purely casual players. They did not have any income at all. The capital's imperial court did not set up any welfare system for the Inhumans. It was all up to the Inhumans themselves. Ignoring the casual players, even combat professional players were in a bad situation. With the outer circle of the capital completely explored, not only did players lose their farming grounds, they also lost many sources of missions. Now, the most popular missions were the missions set up by the imperial court. Every time they appeared, players would fight for them fiercely. It was very lively. In comparison, only the lifestyle players had it easier. This situation further stimulated the development of mercenaries. Fighting on behalf of the feudal lords became a good choice. Breaking away from the capital and the restraints of the capital, exploring a new mode of survival had become the next strategic goal of the large-scale guild. Ouyang Shuo, who had been reborn, knew that Gaia's system update every 4 years would have specific arrangements for this. Chapter 765. Black Snake continued to report, Deputy Commander Zhang Qing is a tactician. He's low-key and is the brains of the mercenary group. Deputy Commander Zhang Ziyue is a knight. He's the treasure of the mercenary group and doesn't participate in the group's affairs. Ouyang Shuo nodded. The three of them were not much different from the previous life. Even in the previous life, he didn't know much about his second brother Zhang Qing. That person was too low-key. Other than in the group affairs, Zhang Qing was like an invisible person. Ouyang Shuo was always out on missions, so the two of them had less contact. In the previous life, Zhang Ziyue was really good to Binger and treated her like a sister. The two of them were often out on missions, so they were close. In this life, they were like strangers. I know the situation. Let number 55 continue to lurk. Ouyang Shuo was dispirited. Understood. If there's nothing else, you can leave. Ouyang Shuo waved his hand. There was still a lot of people waiting for him to approach. Black Snake didn't leave immediately. He said, My lord, there's another piece of information. My lord ordered to check if there are other territories in the north that have contact with the Mongolian tribes. From the current situation, there's no other territory except Fengxiang City. I'm afraid it's just a coincidence. Ouyang Shuo was silent. Ouyang Shuo was very vigilant against the Mongolian tribes. Even so, don't let your guard down. Let the intelligence department in the capital keep watch, and report to me immediately if there's anything unusual. Ouyang Shuo ordered. Understood. Then, Black Snake took his leave. He also knew that his lord's time was precious. After Black Snake left, Ouyang Shuo gave an order to the Civil Affairs Bureau to let Pei Yun bring the Liangshan mercenary group into Shanghai City. As long as the Liangshan mercenary group came to Shanghai City, they couldn't escape Ouyang Shuo's control. After a while, Xiahou Dun, the commander of the Combat Readiness Bureau, came in with his subordinates Wang Zhuan, Wu Peng, and Master O Yezi. However, this meeting had already been scheduled. With the annexation of Lingxi City, Shanghai City had a lot of weapons and equipment manufacturing technology. Not to mention the warships, the armors were the Tang Dynasty's radiant armor and Song Dynasty's infantry armor. The weapons were the Tang Dynasty's swords, lances, bows, and shields. In addition, there were all kinds of siege weapons. These assets were basically obtained by Ouyang Shuo through the previous two system auctions. In the past year and a half, the upgrading of the territory's weapons and equipment had stagnated. The only major breakthrough was the Ming Dynasty cannons. In terms of cold weapons, the 7th Research Institute had only upgraded the forging materials to improve the toughness and sharpness of the weapons. Logically speaking, with Shanghai City's rich accumulation of technology, it should have been able to break away from the shackles of the technical manuals and conduct a second round of research on the original foundation, researching weapons and equipment that were even more advanced than the historical weapons and equipment. But in reality, he didn't. The reasons included objective factors, as well as the lack of cooperation between different departments. The 4 major military workshops had been guarding their own stalls. They had never thought of improving or going up another level. This couldn't go on. After witnessing the power of the P1 cannon, Ouyang Shuo realized that he needed to upgrade the military industry in his territory, especially in the field of cold weapons. Before returning to Shanghai City, Ouyang Shuo had already revealed his thoughts to Xiahou Dun. Now, it was up to the new chief of the Combat Readiness Division to give him an answer. Tell me, what is the Combat Readiness Division thinking? Ouyang Shuo went straight to the point. Xiahou Dun said, My lord, I'm ashamed of your criticism of the Combat Readiness Division. His lord's previous letter was quite rude. If Xiahou Dun hadn't just been appointed and this matter had nothing to do with him, he would have been reprimanded badly. Ouyang Shuo waved his hand. There's no need to apologize. Tell me your specific plan. Yes. Xiahou Dun nodded. This is what the Combat Readiness Division is thinking. We plan to transfer 5 to 6 master craftsmen from the Armor Workshop and the Bow and Crossbow Division. We'll put them together to research new weapons and equipment forging technique. Apart from that, we'll also invite Master O Yezi to lead this team. Ouyang Shuo listened and thought for a while. Master O Yezi is a god-level swordsmith with rich experience. It's a good idea to have him lead the team. However, this is far from enough. If we just transfer a few people together, what kind of sparks will there be? We need to make more changes. How about this? We might as well set up an equipment research center under the Combat Readiness Division. Master O Yezi will be in charge. The research center will gather all the masters of the various types of weapons and equipment in the territory. In areas where the territory's weapons and equipment are weaker, such as heavy swords and warhorse armor, we'll have to spend a lot of money to hire masters from the capital. This way, we'll form a luxurious lineup that will be jointly responsible for the territory's equipment research. In addition, we'll need to borrow people from the 7th Research Institute. We'll ask them to transfer 2 iron and steel experts to participate in the equipment research. Magnus Alchemy Laboratory can also be merged into the Equipment Research Center. In short, the future Equipment Research Center will become the brain of the territory's cold weapons. There's one more thing. The Equipment Research Center shouldn't be complacent, and we can't build cars behind closed doors. We have to constantly work with the Shipbuilding Department, the 7th Research Institute, and other research institutes, as well as Southwest University China Hall and other educational institutions to expand our knowledge, broaden our horizons, and refine more. This way, we'll be able to improve. After saying so much in one go, Ouyang Shuo's mouth was dry. He picked up his teacup and took a big gulp. Xiahou Dun and the others were like obedient students, all of them holding notebooks and scribbling notes down for fear that they would miss out on any information. After double-checking to make sure that there were no mistakes, Xiahou Dun finally raised his head and said solemnly, My lord's words are truly enlightening. We were too conservative. After we leave, we will formulate a detailed plan for the establishment of the Equipment Research Center and submit it to my lord for your judgment. That would be for the best. Ouyang Shuo nodded, then turned his head to glance at Ouyang Yezi. I'll have to trouble you, Grandmaster, to take care of the Equipment Research Center. Ouyang Yezi's heart was filled with anticipation when he heard this. My lord's methods are truly extraordinary, far more daring than Xiahou Dun's. If we really were to follow this plan, the prospects would be limitless. My lord, be at ease. This old man will do his utmost to teach you everything I know, Ouyang Yezi said. Ouyang Shua smiled and nodded. If there's anything you need, Grandmaster, you can report directly to us at the Protectorate headquarters. For the sake of improving the territory's cold weapons, he was determined to open the doors to the Equipment Research Center. Yes. Thus, the matter of establishing the Equipment Research Center was finally settled. Chapter 766. After sending off Xia Ho's group, Ouyang Shua welcomed the last group of officials for the day. They included the Chief of Administration Xiao He, the Chief of Finance Fan Li, the Chief of Industry and Development Planning Cui Yingyu, as well as the person in charge of the 7th Research Institute, Lu Mo. There was also an old man in his 50s mixed in with the group. This was the most important meeting of the day that Ouyang Shua had, and he had purposely left it at the end. Ouyang Shua took a sip of cold tea to ease his mental exhaustion. In just one day, he had approved the coal for equipment plan with West Chu, settled down the 3 Violet Sisters and Lu Bu's group, and established the External Affairs Department, the Training Department, and the Equipment Research and Development Center. Taking advantage of the gap, he had also dealt with the important information and matters related to the Liangshan mercenary group. Ouyang Shua had never encountered such an intensive meeting before. Firstly, he had been away for too long and he had to personally make the final decision. Secondly, the war in Yunnan was imminent and Ouyang Shua had to use this time to quickly deal with the urgent matters of the territory so that he could go to Lingxi City. The meeting this time was related to the industrialization of the territory. The 7th Research Institute had lived up to expectations and had manufactured the steam engine and loom, completing the perfect transition from a technical manual to a real product. Next, they needed to invest in the construction of factories to streamline production and turn the products into commodities. Other than that, the 7th Research Institute had also made significant progress in the research of the Atlantis aircraft. If there were no accidents, they would be able to manufacture the first localized aircraft in March next year. Adding on the P-1 cannon, the 7th Research Institute could be said to have many achievements. Because of this, Ouyang Shua did not go back on his word. The 500,000 yuan that he had promised Lu Mo had already been transferred over. The territory's industry was at a critical juncture and was about to usher in a major explosion. When Ouyang Shua was still inspecting the 3 counties in Lingnan, he had ordered the administration and finance departments to study how to separate the functions of the 2 departments related to industry and form a specialized industrial management organization. The name of the organization would be the Industry Department. The newly established Industry Department would be under the direct control of the Southern Protectorate and would not be included in the 4 departments. At the beginning of the meeting, Xiao He gave a detailed report on the structure of the Industry Department. The current department in charge of the industry was the Industry and Development Department under the Finance Department. It would also be the focus of this separation. In addition, the Department of Science, Education, Culture, and Health under the Department of Science, Education, Culture, and Health would also be transferred to the newly formed Department of Industry. Therefore, the key officials of the Department of Industry would be drawn from these 2 departments. The No. 7 Research Institute would also arrange for a group of relevant experts to join the Industry Department as technical consultants. Some of them would also take on administrative positions and participate in the operations of the Industry Department. Not all of the experts in the Research Institute were dedicated to learning. Some of them were officials of the Federation's Ministry of Science and Technology or the heads of related agencies in real life. They had rich experience in government affairs. These people were the backbone and brains of the Industry Department. The director of the Industry Department was selected from the 7th Research Institute. It was that old man, Old Chun. In reality, he was a high-ranking official of the Commission for Science and Technology of the Federation. For the time being, the planned Industry Department would be divided into 3 major departments: the Science and Technology Department, which was in charge of the territory's industry-related technologies, the Industry Department, which was in charge of industrial planning and factory construction, and the Firearms Department, which was in charge of the research and development of firearms. The research related to warships in the shipbuilding industry would also be incorporated into the Industry Department and directly managed by the Industry Department. It was foreseeable that the newly established Industry Department would be one of the core departments of the territory. It would control the lifeline of the territory's industry and play the role of the territory's industrial navigator. Ouyang Shua signed the organizational adjustment plan that Xiao He handed over and stamped it with his seal. The Industry Department was officially established and started operations immediately. Ouyang Shua didn't stand on ceremony and asked directly, "Old Chen, what's the Industry Department's plan for the construction of the looms and steam engine factories? Has the location been decided?" Old Chen didn't expect that he would be able to participate in core government affairs in the game. He was extremely excited. As a high-ranking official of the Federation, Old Chen had a more thorough understanding of the game's operating mechanism. He could already conclude that the young man in front of him would play an important role in the future of Hope Planet. When he thought about it this way, his current job had an extraordinary significance. Therefore, although the territory's current industrialization was simply primitive compared to the real world, Old Chen didn't have the slightest intention of neglecting it. Before he came, Old Chen had already thought deeply about this problem. He answered, "The Industry Department suggested that all related factories should be built in Zhenhai City." "Tell me the reason." Ouyang Shua was a little surprised. He originally thought that the Industry Department would build the factories in Shanghai City. After all, with the abolition of Lianzhou County and the transfer to Zhili Province, there was still more land available in the basin. Old Chen smiled and explained, "Firstly, Zhenhai City has a natural port like Jiaozhou Port. This is something that Shanghai City can't compare with. Not to mention that Shanghai City is located inland. Even the Beihai port outside is a bit congested because it still plays the role of a military port. Coupled with the impact of ocean trade, there are countless merchant ships coming and going, which makes it even more congested. The future of the Beihai port is already worrying." Ouyang Shua nodded, agreeing with Old Chen's judgment. Unknowingly, the increasingly prosperous Shanghai City had already challenged the Beihai port. In the past, Ouyang Shua had subconsciously built all the best in Shanghai City. Now that he thought about it, it was somewhat inappropriate. As the territory developed, it should also nurture a new center and not add too many functions to Shanghai City. As the future capital, Shanghai City should be built into a political, cultural, and military center. As for the industrial center, economic center, and commercial center, he could choose other suitable cities within the territory to play these roles. Zhenhai City in the Lingnan province was a very good choice. In reality, Zhenhai City was a famous urban agglomeration in the Pearl River Delta, a famous economic belt in the Alliance. It seems that it's time to put the development of Zhenhai City on the agenda, Ouyang Shua thought. Old Chen continued, "Compared to the Beihai port, Jiaozhou Port is closer to the Jiaodong Port in the Ludong Province and the Beihai Port in the north of the capital. It can also save coal transportation time, which is extremely beneficial to the development of the industry. Also, Zhenhai City is located at the end of the Pearl River system. Through the Pearl River system, it can easily radiate the results of industrialization to the Lingnan Province, Chuanan Province, and Yunnan Province." Ouyang Shua nodded and said with a smile, "Old Chen, you've convinced me. We'll do as you say." "Good." Seeing this, Old Chen felt somewhat gratified. At this moment, Fan Li suddenly said, "My lord, there's one thing you need to pay attention to. The sea route from Jiaozhou Port to Jiaodong Port has to pass through the Izhou Strait. The Penghu fleet of Hegemon City has already started regular patrols in this sea area. I'm worried that the large-scale transportation of coal in the future will be intercepted by the Penghu fleet. Ouyang Shua nodded. This is indeed a problem. But Minister Fan, you don't need to worry too much. According to the military plan formulated by the General Administration of Military Affairs, if the war in Yunnan goes smoothly, this problem will be easily solved. The problem that Fan Li mentioned strengthened Ouyang Shua's determination to take the opportunity to solve the problem of Izhou Island. Since my lord has considered it comprehensively, I'm not worried, Fan Li said. Although he said so, Fan Li still had some doubts in his heart. He was not only the saint of commerce, but also quite proficient in military affairs. Fan Li couldn't imagine how the result of the war in Yunnan would affect the Izhou Strait. It was just that it involved military secrets, so Fan Li, as the director of finance, couldn't ask. Seeing that Fan Li had finished speaking, Old Chun continued to say, My lord, the industry department has another matter that needs to be personally decided by my lord. It's about the issue of authorizing the manufacturing technology of the loom and steam engine. Do we need to authorize the relevant allies? When should we authorize it? How should we define the scope of authorization? Old Chun asked a series of 3 questions. Fortunately, Ouyang Shua was already prepared. He said, Since the loom and steam engine have been manufactured, Shanghai City is already one step ahead. Let's not hide it and authorize what needs to be authorized. However, we can't blindly authorize it. My opinion is to authorize the manufacturing technology of the steam engine to Fallen Phoenix City and Hardstone City in the north. They are all large areas that produce coal. With the assistance of the steam engine, it will greatly increase the efficiency of coal mining. As for West Chu, we can't authorize the technology, but we can sell the finished steam engine to them to help West Chu upgrade their coal industry. As for Black Lion City and Dragon Seeking City in the south, we can authorize the loom technology. Silkworm breeding is mainly in the south. With the steam engine, they can also promote the upgrading of their respective territories. Ouyang Shua's strategy was to authorize the technology separately. This way, it wouldn't exceed the limit of 5 territories, allowing the 2 technologies to be popularized in China. At the same time, it could increase the strength of their allies. The industry department can draft the specific authorization contract. Ouyang Shua instructed. Old Chen nodded. Understood. At this moment, someone stood up to object. It was Yingyu. My lord, I don't object to authorizing the loom technology to Black Lion City. However, shouldn't Dragon Seeking City reconsider? Yinyu's words caused the atmosphere in the study to become a little strange. Who didn't know that Dragon Seeking City and Shanghai City weren't on good terms? Fan Li and the others also couldn't understand their lord's decision, but they couldn't say it out loud. It was Yingyu who boldly exposed this scar. When Ouyang Shua heard this, he didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled. How could he not consider Yinyu's question? Such a decision naturally had its reasons. Dragon Seeking City was at odds with Shanghai City, and there was even the possibility of them betraying the alliance. However, before Dragon Seeking City took any substantial action, Ouyang Shua didn't want to treat them differently. Especially since Lingnan had just been pacified, and the war in the west was about to start. Maintaining a relatively peaceful east was obviously more in line with Shanghai City's strategic layout. If they treated Dragon Seeking City differently now, with Dragon Seeking City's stubborn character, who knew what kind of trouble it would cause? Chapter 767. Compared to the overall strategy of the territory, a mere technology license was nothing. That was why Ouyang Shua agreed to authorize the weaving machine manufacturing technology to Dragon Seeking City. Technology authorization couldn't be given to someone of a higher level. This meant that even if Dragon Seeking City obtained the weaving machine manufacturing technology, they couldn't give it to anyone else. Even if Xiongba and the others wanted to do something about the weaving machine, it wouldn't matter. Ouyang Shuo had the intention to promote the two technologies to the entire China region at the right time. No matter how the Shanghai Alliance and the Yanhuang Alliance fought, it could only be considered an internal conflict. In the future, the two alliances might have to work together in the war. It was Ouyang Shuo's duty to improve China's technology tree. I've already considered this matter, there's no need to discuss it further. Ouyang Shuo put aside Ing Yu's objection. Ing Yu looked at Ouyang Shuo and nodded without saying anything. Seeing the awkward atmosphere, Fan Li interrupted, "My lord, there's something else that the finance department has to report. The Commerce Department and the ASEAN countries have already held the first round of negotiations on the timber trade. They proposed an additional condition, hoping to obtain the right to purchase Shanghai City's warships." Ouyang Shuo shook his head. "Their appetite is quite big. The ASEAN lords weren't fools, and they weren't friendly either. In the southern seas, the ASEAN countries' fleets were suppressed by Shanghai City's fleet, and they wouldn't accept it no matter what. It was imperative for the ASEAN countries to form a powerful fleet to fight against Shanghai City's fleet. The admiral of the Singapore fleet, Smoke and Fire Evildoer, had sent a secret letter to Ouyang Shuo a long time ago, saying that the navy of Java, Johor, Luzon, and other countries were ready to make a comeback. If it wasn't for the Singapore Navy, the situation would have been bad. That was why Ouyang Shuo established the Nanyang Navy's headquarters after the Battle of Chibi. One of his intentions was to suppress the ASEAN countries' navy. Other than the South, the rest of the ASEAN countries were either coastal or island countries. They didn't lack sailors, and their sailing skills were remarkable. The only weakness was that their warship manufacturing technology was lagging behind China's. That was why they had their eyes on Shanghai City's warship. Inform the Commerce Division's negotiation team and tell them that Shanghai City is willing to sell them warships, but they have to limit the number of warships they can supply. In addition, we have to raise the price by at least 2 times. Ouyang Shuo gave an unexpected answer. Naturally, there was no need to be polite to the ASEAN countries. In reality, before the establishment of the United Nations, when countries had a monopoly on a certain technology, the profits from exports were several times, or even more than 10 times. It was simply robbery. Ouyang Shuo didn't feel any psychological pressure when he set the price. The Department of Commerce also needs to pay attention to tactics in negotiations. Try to exaggerate the amount of wood required for each warship and the production cycle of the warship as much as possible. At the same time, inform the ASEAN lords that if they want to buy warships, they have to sell us twice the amount of wood. First come, first serve. Whoever sells us the wood first will have the priority to purchase the warship. The ASEAN was not united. Ouyang Shuo believed that the feudal lords would fight to sell the wood to Shanghai City in order to get the warships first. This was a pleasant surprise. Now that the ASEAN countries had a demand for Shanghai City's warships, they would have no choice but to make concessions in the wood trade negotiations. At the very least, they would no longer have the confidence to insist on a high price. Ouyang Shuo's decision to sell warships to the ASEAN countries was not because he was greedy, but because the territory's shipbuilding department was already organizing the research and development of a new generation of warships. The new warship was temporarily named the Z-1 warship. It would combine the dual characteristics of the Ming Dynasty warships and the British sailing battleships, and undergo a revolutionary upgrade. The keel of the experimental warship was the Black Dragon keel that Ouyang Shuo had obtained on Dragon Island. After the completion of the construction, it would be Ouyang Shuo's new generation flagship. Ouyang Shuo knew that the British sailing battleships were the future trend of warship. This was because the modern ironclad warships were evolved step by step from the foundation of the sailing battleship. If Shanghai City wanted to build ironclad warships in the future, they would first have to understand the manufacturing technology of the sailing battleship. At the same time, the Ming Dynasty warships also had their merit. There were many aspects that the new warship could learn from. The combination of the two would definitely give birth to a more powerful warship. As long as the Z-1 warship was successfully developed, coupled with the P-1-2 cannon specially equipped by the 7th Research Institute, Shanghai City would be able to upgrade the Nanyang Navy. By that time, even if the ASEAN Navy had the warships, they would not be able to challenge the Nanyang Navy. In other words, if the ASEAN countries emptied their pockets and used countless high-quality wood to buy warships that Shanghai City would soon be obsolete, they would still be suppressed by Shanghai City in the end. Ouyang Shua asked the Commerce Department to buy time for Shanghai City to develop the new warship through negotiations. To replace the Z-1 warship, they would need a large amount of wood. They had to stock up in advance. In the process, they would also be able to make a lot of money, so why not? Fan Li's eyes lit up when he heard this. He smiled and said, "I will definitely pass on your opinion to the negotiators of the Commerce Department." "That's good." Ouyang Shua naturally believed that Fan Li would handle it well. It was already 5 in the afternoon when Fan Li and the others left. Since there was still some time before dinner, Ouyang Shua did not see anyone else and began to deal with the memorials. Other than Ouyang Shua, there was another beautiful figure in the study. It was Qingyi, who had just been appointed. Qingyi's horizons had been broadened after attending 3 consecutive meetings. The various chiefs of Shanghai City were all overlords of a region, and all of them had their own opinions. It was rare that Ouyang Shua, the ruler, was able to control all of them. He was able to give clear and logical guidance on government affairs, and even those old foxes were convinced. Qingyi's eyes lit up when she saw this. Ouyang Shua, who handled government affairs seriously and gave advice, had an extraordinary charm. Qingyi felt even more pressured. Although the young lady looked weak, she was very strong. Since she had accepted this task, she had to do it well. Ouyang Shua did not care about Qingyi's muttering, and began to quickly deal with the memorials. Those who were qualified to submit memorials to him could be roughly divided into 4 categories. First, intelligence agencies like the Black Snake Guards and the Shanghai Guards. Most of the memorials were passed on by the Black Snake Guards and Xinbuhai. When Ouyang Shua was in Shanghai City, it was more through face-to-face reporting. Second, the generals of the field army. According to the rules, the generals of corps commanders and above, including the Navy Admiral, could directly report military affairs to Ouyang Shua. The commanders of the lower divisions did not have this authority, as it would be skipping ranks to report. Third, the governors of the various counties. The local governors, including the 2 city governors of Friendship City and Base City, all had the authority to directly submit memorials. Furthermore, they had to make a routine report at least once a month. If the prefectural magistrate encountered an emergency, he could make an exception and submit a memorial. As for what was considered an emergency, the General Administration of Administration had detailed rules. Exceeding this scope would be considered skipping ranks to report. Fourth, the chiefs of the various agencies in the Protectorate. Other than the 4 chiefs of the General Administration, the chiefs or bureau chiefs below had the authority to directly report to Ouyang Shua. Of course, unless it was a thorny problem or an errand that Ouyang Shua had personally assigned, the 4 chiefs would usually report on his behalf. With this calculation, there were 50 to 60 people qualified to report to Ouyang Shua. If unexpected situations were included, the scale would be even larger. It was fine for Ouyang Shua to oversee Shanghai City, and some government affairs could be discussed face to face. When it came to matters that crossed departments, he could even pull the chiefs together to discuss it. But if Ouyang Shua was not in Shanghai City, things would be terrible. When something happened, they could only communicate through memorials. Sometimes, they would have to go back and forth several times for a single matter. When it came to matters that crossed departments, it was even more difficult. But when Ouyang Shua was outside, he basically had no time during the day. He could only review memorials at night. As such, it was no wonder he was busy until late at night when he was in Lingnan. Thankfully, Gaia had established such an efficient relay station system. Be it secret letters or memorials, they could be delivered in seconds. It was no different from email in real life. Otherwise, the feudal lords would not be able to attend to the affairs of the territory when they were outside. Gaia's arrangement was clearly a humane design. While taking into account the uniqueness of the feudal lords, it also trained the feudal lords' ability to handle government affairs. The memorial that Ouyang Shuo was reviewing was submitted by the Star Continent County Governor, Pei Ju. It was about a thread's intention to set up a branch in Star Continent County. Pei Ju had sought Ouyang Shuo's opinion. When it came to matters involving inhumans, the local county governors were more cautious. Love Thread had a keen eye. He knew that the ASEAN countries around Star Continent County were a huge raw material base. It was naturally a great opportunity for a guild that purely focused on lifestyle players like a Thread. Now that he had applied, it was obvious that Shanghai City had already gained a foothold in Nanyang. This woman is still as shrewd as ever. Ouyang Shuo shook his head with a smile. He wrote a red note at the end of the memorial. There were only a few words in total, agreed. Star Continent County can deal with it as it sees fit. Unknowingly, it was already past 6 o'clock after reviewing the memorials. At this moment, a tiny head popped in from the study. It was Binger. The young lady shouted towards the door, "Brother, it's time to eat. I've been so busy ever since I came back that I even forgot to eat." The young lady was almost becoming a housekeeper. When Ouyang Shuo heard that, he perked up and stretched his back. "All right, coming." He turned to look at Cyan Shirt and said, "Cyan Shirt, you can get off work first." "All right." Cyan Shirt was also engrossed. She naturally would not eat with Ouyang Shuo. When Lingxi City was annexed, the construction division had built a mansion for Bai Hua in Shanghai City. The three Violet sisters were living there now. They were very comfortable. The lively day came to an end. Chapter 768. During dinner, Song Jia took the initiative to mention something to Ouyang Shuo. "Wui, I've settled the matter of investing in Glamorous Studio." Ouyang Shuo nodded with a smile. "Good. Madam, did you invest in your own name?" "Of course not." Song Jia shook her head and said proudly, "You already said that you want to dominate the entertainment industry, so what's the point of investing personally? I pulled Bai Hua Yu, Bai Shui, and Auntie together to invest in a holding company. We've even decided on a name, Mountain and Sea Entertainment Holdings." Wow. Ouyang Shuo sucked in a breath of cold air. The four partners that Song Jia had recruited were all nouveau riches. Bai Hua was the former lord of Lingxi City, and had a lot of money. After stepping down as a lord, the monthly tribute from Kunming County was also a large sum of money, and his personal wealth would only continue to rise. Mu Lanyue was the same as Bai Hua. Bai Shui was the mistress of Baisher trading, so how could she be poor? Auntie Lin Jing was the second in command of Snow Rose Mercenary Group, so she naturally had some money as well. Ouyang Shuo began to look forward to the future of Mountain and Sea Entertainment Holdings. Among the four, Bai Shui's investment surprised Ouyang Shuo the most. Bai Hua, Mu Lanyue, and Lin Jing were all players, so they weren't unfamiliar with the entertainment industry. It was normal for them to invest when they heard that it was his suggestion. After all, Ouyang Shuo's foresight had been proven countless times. As an NPC, the entertainment industry was a completely foreign field to Bai Shui. Who knew if Bai Shui's investment was to curry favor with Song Jia, the future queen, or if she saw a business opportunity? Perhaps it was a combination of both. "How much did you invest?" Ouyang Shuo was really curious. Song Jia smiled sweetly. "I've invested all of the 1 million gold coins you gave me, 50% of the shares. Bai Hua invested 400,000 gold coins, 20% of the shares. Yu, Bai Shui, and Little Ant each invested 200,000 gold coins, 10% of the shares. Amazing. Ouyang Shua gave a thumbs up. It was indeed a huge sum of money. An entertainment holding company with an initial registered capital of 2 million gold coins was unprecedented in the world, not to mention in China. Ouyang Shua asked, "Does Madam have any specific plans?" Song Jia nodded. She also wanted Ouyang Shua's help. Currently, other than the company's capital, its only asset is the 40% shares of Glamorous Beauty Studio. Therefore, the real business of the group is to assist Glamorous Studio in filming The Beauty of the Country. No more recruits? Ouyang Shua asked curiously. None of the 5 partners were idle people. Even Song Jia, as the Lord's wife, often had to represent Ouyang Shua and attend various events in Royal City. Therefore, he had to recruit help. More importantly, the 5 partners, including Song Jia, were complete laymen when it came to the entertainment industry. If there were no professionals to help manage it, no matter how rich the group's funds were, it would not be able to make any wave. Speaking of this, Song Jia felt a headache coming on. Yes, but it didn't go well. In real life, actors, singers, directors, producers, and other people in the industry basically changed their names when they entered the game. It was very difficult to contact them. We don't dare to post a recruitment notice on the forum in case we attract the attention of people with ulterior motive. Anyone could see the background of the entertainment group with the name Mountain Sea. The players in the wilderness now had a common understanding. Any industry that Shanghai City had set its eyes on was a lucrative industry. The history of Shanghai City, relying on sea salt, had long been spread throughout the wilderness and became a legend. If others really noticed the recruitment notice, it would probably trigger a talent competition. This was something Song Jia did not want to see, so she could only carry it out secretly. However, it was too difficult to find these people in the vast sea of people. These people in the industry had limitless fame in real life, but in the game, they were basically ordinary people and hard to find. People like Wu Qingqing who refused to give up were really rare animals. Ouyang Shua listened to Song Jia's complaints and smiled. Since I was the one who suggested this idea, I naturally can't just stand by and do nothing. How about this? I'll tell Black Snake tomorrow to have the Black Snake Guards fully cooperate with Mountain Sea Entertainment Holdings to search for film and television talent. The Black Snake Guards' tentacles had already spread throughout the wilderness and had long reached every corner of Royal City. Celebrities in real life were ultimately different from ordinary people, so it was not easy for the Black Snake Guards to find them. As long as they found a few people, they would be able to follow the clues. It's best if we can catch all the top talents in the industry in one fell swoop. We can pay them a little higher, and it's not a big deal even if we keep them for free. The penalty for breach of contract is set high, so that they don't jump ship in the future, Ouyang Shua said. The more Song Jia listened, the brighter her eyes became. Then I won't have to worry. Ouyang Shua continued. Even if we poach them, we can't really keep them for free. With the financial strength of the group, we can totally invest in another movie. As long as it's screened at the same time as Beauty of the Nation, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. That's what we're thinking too. We originally wanted to make a wuxia movie, but now that the pugilistic world is not prominent and there's no wuxia trend in the wilderness, I'm afraid it won't be good. Song Jia was still a wuxia fan. Ouyang Shua smiled. Don't worry, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. The popularity of wuxia is the general trend. However, your idea is right. It really isn't suitable to make a wuxia movie now. A war theme is a good choice. Song Jia glanced at Ouyang Shua, and a strange look flashed in her eyes. Bai Hua's idea is the same as yours. He also suggested making a war theme movie. Then let's do it. Song Jia shook her head. She was a little worried and said, "We haven't thought about what to shoot yet. This is the first movie produced by the group. It's very meaningful, so of course we have to make it a hit." Ouyang Shua's eyes flashed. He suddenly thought of someone. I have an idea. Say it. Song Jiao was full of interest. What do you think about Hua Tsubing? He has thousands of fangirls. Even his die-hard male fans are not few. He's a real superstar in the wilderness, Ouyang Shua said with a smile. Uncle Hua Tsubing is so handsome. Abruptly, a voice popped up from the side. It was Bing that lass. Bing and Hua Tsubing's niece, Hua Qingjun, were good friends. Bing was also very fond of the inhumanly handsome Uncle Hua Tsubing and was a loyal fan. Hua Qingjun's niece, on the other hand, was more obsessed with Ouyang Shua. The two little girls had argued about who was more handsome and even had a small argument. It was very worrisome. Hey young girl. Ouyang Shua completely ignored the little girl and looked at Song Jia. Song Jia smiled when she saw Binger's cute look. She said, "That's a good idea. The problem is that General Hua is leading troops outside, so he can't be involved in the movie, right? That's easy. Find a stunt double who looks like Hua Tsubing, or go to the market and see if there are any temporary masks that can change the actor's appearance. Shoot the basic framework first, and when the Yunnan War begins, arrange for a film crew to follow Hua Tsubing and film the war scenes in real time. Wouldn't that be more realistic and exciting than hiring extras?" Ouyang Shua was an experienced person, so he knew a little about games and movies from his previous life. That was the biggest charm of games that differed from reality. The top historical figures produced by Gaia were all living superstars in the wilderness. They were truly super IPs. It was impossible for a movie that they personally participated in to not be popular. Think about it. In real life, a film crew could ride a time machine and travel to the era where Hua Mulan lived to follow her life. The filmed Hua Mulan, after some artistic editing, would cause a huge commotion in real life after it was broadcasted. But in a game, the impossible became possible. Want to film Qin Huang and Han Wu? Sure, go to the Xianying and Luoyang palaces. Want to see Wudong and Shaolin? No problem. When the two major sects appeared in the wilderness, they would open their doors wide. Filming the Four Scholars of Jiangnan, a pirate movie, an epic war, or a biography of a historical figure was not a problem. As long as one had enough resources, as long as one dared to think about it, there was nothing that could not be done. It was such an alternative world that led to the explosion of the entertainment industry in games. The 5 years of Ouyang Shua's rebirth in Gaia was just the beginning. There was an endless imagination in it. Apart from the above, one could also innovate on this basis and create original work. The top players in the game could even be packaged into top superstars step by step. The future was unimaginable. Ouyang Shua's words woke Song Jia up from a dream. It was as if she had been enlightened and opened a door to a vast world filled with imagination. At this moment, the future big shot of the entertainment industry woke up. "Wui, I know what to do." Song Jia was full of confidence. Ouyang Shua smiled. "Then I'll wait and see." No one knew what kind of change and impact the conversation that night would bring to the wilderness. Even the people involved did not realize what kind of nuclear explosion their actions would cause in the wilderness. The next morning, Shanghai City was especially lively under the sunlight. The newly appointed Director General of Training, Gao Shun, hurriedly left Shanghai City with a few subordinates arranged by the military administration. When he arrived, Gao Shun would conduct a comprehensive investigation of the various counties' garrison divisions and reserve forces. Gao Shun was very smart. He knew that as the newly appointed Director General of Training, he did not have much of a deterrent to the various field armies. Therefore, the first thing he did after taking office was to burn the garrison divisions and reserve forces. His method was to gradually establish a training system for the entire army from the bottom up. Chapter 770. After Bai Chi's gaze swept over them, the three intelligence chiefs felt ashamed. equals updated fastest. The 200,000-strong army seemed to have vanished into thin air in the mountains of Yunnan. No matter how they searched, they couldn't find a single trace. If they hadn't confirmed that the Allied army had already arrived in Yunnan, they would have suspected it to be fake news. The secrecy had been done well this time. The intelligence organizations had displayed a counter-investigation ability comparable to the Black Snake Guard. Ouyang Shu asked in confusion. 200,000-strong army will have to consume rations. Did the intelligence organizations find any clues from this aspect? Shun Buhai shook his head. All the intelligence agencies are keeping an eye on the situation. There are no signs of large-scale mobilization of rations. I suspect that the cities had already prepared rations long before the Allied army arrived. They were really careful. The lesson in blood made them even more careful this time. They had considered all aspects. Only a small number of people knew where the Allied army was. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to keep guessing. Ouyang Shu nodded and looked at Bai Qi, then send out an aerial squad to conduct a carpet search in the mountains. Ouyang Shu was prepared to use his trump card. Currently, only Ouyang Shu could mobilize the aerial squad. After the battle at Guiping Pass, he had already returned to Shanghai City's aerial base to rest. Ouyang Shu didn't believe that they could escape the detection of the Air Force. That couldn't be better. Bai Qi also had no choice. The battle was about to begin, but he didn't even know where the enemy was. This was the first time he had encountered such a predicament. Ouyang Shu changed the topic. Commander Bai, how are the 6 great armies of the Western Punitive Expedition planned? Tell us everything. If there's anything you need help with, tell us. The General of Military Affairs was only responsible for formulating the overall strategy. They wouldn't interfere with the specific tactical arrangements. As for the Western Punitive Expedition, Bai Qi was in charge of the battle in Yunnan. Even Ouyang Shu wouldn't interfere with the arrangements of the Western Punitive Expedition. He asked this to first be prepared, and second to express his support for Bai Qi. This was an incomparable war. It wasn't just the front line that was bustling. The rear also needed cooperation. Ouyang Shu was stationed at Lingxi City to oversee the rear of the army. Lingxi City had just been annexed, and Ouyang Shu was worried that Bai Hua's coordination with the Western Expedition Army might have deviated. With him around, the situation would naturally be different. When Bai Qi heard this, he understood the meaning behind his lordship's words and began to explain the pre-war arrangements in detail. Currently, it occupied 3.5 counties. Other than Mengding County in the south, Tingyue County in the west, and Dongchuan County in the north, the remaining half was Dali County, where the capital Dali was located. The 4 counties were all bordered by Kunming County. If one were to refer to the map of China, then Kunming County was equivalent to the Central Plains, a veritable land of 4 wars. The Western Punitive Expedition planned to divide into 3 groups and attack Mengding County, Tingyue County, and Dongchuan County respectively. According to the territorial strategy, Dali County was not within the scope of this Yunnan War. Ouyang Shu didn't want to provoke Dali for the time being. Otherwise, he would probably end up badly bruised. The 1,000,000 imperial guards of Royal City were not to be trifled with. Apart from the army, the players had to be taken into consideration when attacking the Royal City. This was because once the Royal City was attacked by the country's feudal lords, a war mission would be issued in the city, conscripting the Royal City's players to participate in the war and resist the enemy together. Just the thought of only half of the 8 million players accepting the mission was enough to make one's scalp tingle. Even in Gaia's 4th year, the Royal City was an absolute forbidden zone for feudal lord players. No matter how arrogant Ouyang Shu was, he never thought of entering such a minefield. The 200,000-strong Allied army was still stationed in Mengding County. Mengding County was also the predetermined main battlefield for the Yunnan War. If there were no accidents, it would be a bitter battle in Mengding. As for the 200,000-strong Allied army, although it was impossible to determine their whereabouts, from the way they tried their best to hide their tracks. The Allied army probably wanted to launch a surprise attack on the Western punitive expedition. The teleportation tactic was used well and was still a very sharp assault tactic. From the successful concealment of the army's tracks before the war, it was clear that they were very confident and wouldn't be stupid enough to repeat the same mistakes. Unlike Lingnan, Yunnan's terrain was more complicated. A county could not accommodate too many troops. The Western punitive expedition had split into 3 groups due to strategic considerations and also out of helplessness. The roads in the 3 counties were difficult to traverse. Once one of the armies was ambushed, the other 2 armies would not be able to provide reinforcements and could only resolve the situation on their own. As such, the Allied army's teleportation tactic provided them with a geographical advantage. It was impossible for the Western punitive expedition to replicate the Eastern punitive expedition's method of encircling them. Therefore, Bai Qi would arrange for a corps to be stationed in Lingxi City to provide support. The corps he chose was the recently formed 2nd Imperial Guard Corps, also known as the famous Tiger Leopard Cavalry. The Tiger Leopard Cavalry was Shanghai City's first pure cavalry corps and had the highest mobility. According to the latest military reports, the Tiger Leopard Cavalry had already crossed Zhenan County and would arrive at Lingxi City in the next few days. The other corps, the Dragon Stallion Army's 4th Army, would take another 4 to 5 days to reach the border of Zhenan County. According to the High Command's opinion, which county will the Allied army set up an ambush in? Ouyang Shuo asked. Bai Qi shook his head. Any one is possible. I'm guessing that the Allied army has set up 3 ambush points. During the process, they will be able to choose an ambush point according to the course of the war and our army's arrangements. In that case, we should guide them appropriately? Ouyang Shuo's eyes flashed. That's right. There are too many uncertainties in the 3 ambush points. The only way is to deliberately expose a flaw in one of the counties and draw the snake out of its hole. This way, we can once again seize the initiative in the war. Uncertainty was a fatal threat to a war. Any famous general would do their best to eliminate these uncertainties. Even a small sacrifice would be worth it. Ouyang Shuo nodded. It was good that Bai Qi knew what to do. Shanghai City wasn't to be trifled with, and they had their own spies. It was just bad luck that they couldn't find any traces of the Allied army, but the ones who knew the inside story weren't Shanghai City's friends. I predict that the enemy will take the initiative to go on the defensive in the early stages of the war and even abandon a few cities. Their goal is to force the Western punitive expedition to penetrate deep into the enemy's territory and test their ability to transport supplies. The mountain roads in Yunnan were rugged, and maintaining the long transport routes was a huge test. The long transport routes could also be attacked by the enemy at any time. Any of the elite mountain troops that came out of the forest could deal a fatal blow to the grain transport team. The enemy would definitely not let go of this fatal weakness of the Western punitive expedition. Unlike the Battle of Lingnan, the Western punitive expedition was not launching a surprise attack. The cities would have enough time to move supplies. At the very least, he would be able to burn all of the rations in one go. Thus, the greatest test for the Western punitive expedition in the war in Yunnan was provisions. This was precisely why Ouyang Shuo had rushed to Lingxi City. Chapter 771. December 2nd, Lingxi City. Hua Tsubing led the Imperial Guard Corps north and attacked Dongchuan Commandery. This was the right army, and it was also the only one of the 3 armies that consisted of only one corps. Dongchuan County was the smallest county in the Yunnan province. There was only one surviving player territory in the county, and it was separated from Tingyue County and Mengding County by Dali County. It was like an isolated city-state. Logically speaking, Dongchuan County was the least valuable place to attack. after defeating the Allied forces and the main force of the Allied forces, there was still time to come back and clean up the place. There was no need to make a big fuss about it. However, the fact was that Bai Qi attached great importance to Dongchuan Prefecture and had dispatched the strongest legion of the Western Punitive Army. On the other hand, Bai Qi wanted to borrow the invincible edge of the Imperial Guards, as well as their expertise in assault warfare, to take down Dongchuan County as soon as possible and remove the hidden danger in the north, thereby stabilizing the morale of the army on the main battlefield. In addition, he could also use this to deter Dali County. It could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. Secondly, the situation in Dongchuan Prefecture was complicated. Not for anything else, but because to the north of Dongchuan County was the land of Shu. Due to the hostile relationship between the Shu Han Imperial Court and Shanghai City, the general administration of military affairs could not guarantee that the Shu state would not intervene in the war in Yunnan. The best way is to first occupy Dongchuan County and block the southward route of Shu. In view of this, Dongchuan County also became an excellent ambush point for the Allied forces. According to Bai Qi's analysis, Dongchuan County was the most likely ambush point. That was why Bai Qi had sent Hua Tsubing on this mission. On the same day, Shi Wansui led the 2nd Dragon Stallion Army and Zhang Liao led the 3rd Dragon Stallion Army to the west, jointly responsible for attacking Tingyue County. This route was the central route, with Shi Wansui as the commander and Zhang Liao as the deputy commander. The two corps of the Central Route Army were experienced battle-hardened, with a famous general like Shi Wansui holding the fort, and Zhang Liao, who was familiar with Yunnan, assisting them. The two of them complemented each other perfectly. Bai Qi had high hopes for the Central Army. Tengchong City, where the iconic figure of Yunnan city-state, Qin Fun lived, was located in Tingyue County. It was obvious that the sky-traversing county was a tough bone to chew. Qin Feng was not a good person. He would definitely try his best to protect his territory at a critical moment. Therefore, the Allied army's secondary ambush point was very likely to be in Tingyue County. Qin Feng was the link between Yunnan city-state and Yan Huang alliance. Di Chun and the others probably didn't want Qin Feng to be eliminated early, so they would definitely make a move at the crucial moment. According to Bai Qi's plan, if the Middle Army's battle went smoothly, they would be able to move from Tingyue County to Mengding County before the end of the war and join up with the Left Army to reinforce the main battlefield. The Left Army was personally led by Bai Qi, the commander of the Western expedition, and included the Dragon Stallion Army's 2nd Corps as well as the 4th Corps, which was on the way. The 21st Legion was to head south and attack Mengding County. At the same time, the 3rd Corps of the Leopard Army stationed in Zhenan County would also be temporarily transferred to the Left Army. When the time was right, they would enter the main battlefield from the border. Since Mengding County had been designated as the main battlefield, Bai Qi dared not let his guard down. Thus, he deployed 3 major armies to attack Mengding County. Even so, Mengding County was probably the county with the latest outbreak of war. Bai Qi's plan was to mobilize his army and pin down the 200,000 Allied troops stationed in Mengding County. However, he was not in a hurry to attack the city. When the Right Army and the Middle Army had a result, he would launch an all-out attack with the momentum of Mount Tai. 3 armies, 3 different strategies. Fortunately, the commanders of these 3 armies were all famous generals of the present age. They could execute Bai Qi's strategy very well, and they could also make adjustments according to the actual situation of the battlefield. Otherwise, they wouldn't dare to do this. This was where Shanghai City's advantage lay. As the saying goes, if the soldiers are fierce, the general will be in a fierce nest. This famous general would improve the army in all aspects. After the left, middle, and right army broke camp, they majestically rushed towards the battlefield from 3 different directions. Following behind the army was a densely packed grain transport team. As long as the war didn't end, the grain transport vehicles on the official road would not be cut off. Ouyang Shua stood at the top of the city wall, silently watching the vast army leave. His tall and straight figure with a scarlet cloak became the most beautiful scenery on the city wall. Every soldier who was about to rush to the battlefield would subconsciously turn their head and look at that imposing figure. Although that figure was blurry, it gave the soldiers an indescribable strength, supporting them to kill the enemy. Ouyang Shua stood there for the whole day. In order to not miss a soldier, he didn't even have time to eat lunch. During this time, Bai Hua came to persuade Ouyang Shua to return to the city to eat, but Ouyang Shua tactfully refused. Seeing this, Bai Hua had a complicated expression. He left a sigh and silently left the city wall. For Ouyang Shua, this was an unshirkable mission. The soldiers shed their blood on the front lines, fighting for the honor of their territory. As the Lord, the supreme commander of the army, and the invincible god of war in the hearts of millions of soldiers, Ouyang Shua would feel guilty if he didn't do anything. The sun was setting and the sky was filled with the afterglow. The orange afterglow covered the top of the city wall with an elegant layer of gauze, making it look magnificent. That figure stood tall and straight, without the slightest bit of wavering. Under the afterglow, it was as if he was wearing a golden armor, growing taller and taller. Only when the last soldier disappeared into the distant horizon did Ouyang Shua turn and leave. Even with his profound cultivation, standing motionlessly for the whole day made his body feel slightly numb. No matter what, it's still worth it. Ouyang Shua looked at the distant sky one last time, feeling the boundless killing intent and soaring battle intent of the army slowly condensing in the air, forming an invincible battle momentum. He felt extremely gratified. His personal guards and 3,000 divine martial guards stood with the Lord for the whole day. Seeing the Lord turn around, the soldiers saluted in unison, the worship in their eyes almost materializing. "Go back!" Ouyang Shua waved his hand and disappeared from the top of the city wall. Night began to envelop Lingxi City, Kunming County, and all of Yunnan. It was quiet. Under the quiet night sky, the flames of war had already been ignited, illuminating the night sky. Lingxi City, Prefectural Governor's Office. However, Bai Hua deliberately waited for Ouyang Shua to eat. Bai Hua was helpless against Ouyang Shua's stubborn temper. He could only instruct the kitchen to prepare a large table of delicacies and personally entertain Ouyang Shua. At the dining table, Bai Hua ladled a bowl of Aunt Song's fish soup for Ouyang Shua and handed it over, saying, "Violet and the others, I'll have to trouble you to make arrangements." Ouyang Shua smiled as he received the steaming hot fish soup, saying, "There's no need to trouble me. Just don't blame me for stealing your good sisters. They can all be of great help and save me a lot of trouble. It's time for them to spread their wings and soar. What can they do by my side?" As the eldest sister of the four beauties, Bai Hua had been worried for a long time and actually felt a little like a mother. The eldest sister was like a mother. This had always been the case since ancient times. Bai Hua inadvertently glanced at Ouyang Shua and asked, "Why did you get Qingyi to be your secretary?" Ouyang Shua almost choked on the fish soup. "What secretary? An assistant. Don't tell me you're like Violet and think that I have some thoughts about Qingyi? I'm innocent." Ouyang Shua was somewhat speechless. "Even if you have any thoughts, it's fine." "What?" Ouyang Shua's eyes widened, not daring to believe that these words came out of Bai Hua's mouth. Bai Hua, on the other hand, was calm and said, "Qingyi already has a good impression of you, what's the big deal? But I'm already married." Ouyang Shua's head was about to explode. "You're destined to ascend to the throne, so what does it matter if you have one more?" Bai Hua's palms were sweaty as he said these words, and his heart was beating uncontrollably. Only God knew how much courage it took for Bai Hua to say these words. Ouyang Shua sensed Bai Hua's abnormality, and his expression became even more strange. He waved his hand. "Let's not talk about this, it feels too strange. I promise that I only like Qingyi because of her talent, and absolutely have no other improper thoughts. Bai Hua's face instantly turned pale, and he said with a forced smile, "Look at you, I'm just testing you with my words. Hearing you say this, I'm also relieved." "That's good." Ouyang Shua also smiled, pretending to be unaware of Bai Hua's expression. The atmosphere at the dining table suddenly became somewhat awkward. "Let's talk about rations." Ouyang Shua tactfully changed the topic and said, "From what Bai Qi said, I'm afraid that this war will last longer than expected. The rations prepared by the War Preparation Department are somewhat insufficient, so can Kunming County assist the War Preparation Department to purchase more rations? If not, then we'll have to let the War Preparation Department purchase rations from Zhenan County and Sunzhou County in advance. Other than rations, there's also the issue of preparing fodder for the warhorses. We can't be careless." Bai Hua calmed himself down and said, "Don't worry, I'll cooperate with the War Preparation Department. If there's even a shortage of rations at the front lines, I'll take the blame and resign." Ouyang Shu waved his hand. "It's not that exaggerated, I believe you." The next morning, Ouyang Shua once again summoned the heads of the 3 intelligence agencies. Other than reiterating that the 3 intelligence agencies should closely cooperate with the Western Expedition Army and provide good intelligence services, Ouyang Shua's main purpose this time was to ensure the safety of the chess pieces of Yunnan City State. Ouyang Shua said, "You've all seen the methods of Imperial Wind, a Spring Dawn, and Battle Song, and they're not any weaker than us. Therefore, we have to ensure that the chess pieces we've chosen are not exposed. Especially that most important chess piece, it can't be exposed. It's directly related to the success or failure of the war in Yunnan." This, Shinbuhai, the Black Snake, and Cobra all had serious expressions on their faces. They really did not dare to guarantee anything. If they really made a wrong move, it would be a bottomless abyss. "Why don't I go and confirm it myself?" the Black Snake suggested. Ouyang Shua nodded. "That would be for the best." "All right, I'll go immediately." The Black Snake nodded and acted swiftly. Chapter 772. 5th of December, Yunnan Province. Hua Tsubing's 1st Imperial Guard Corps was the first to reach the front lines. They crossed the border and charged into Dongchuan Prefecture, igniting the first battle in the Yunnan War. In the following week, the battle in Dongchuan Prefecture was unusually smooth. With the cooperation of the cavalry and the Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Division as the main attacking force, the 1st Imperial Guard Corps attacked cities and conquered land. They didn't meet any decent resistance along the way, and cities fell into Shanghai City's hands one after another. Lingxi City had long mastered the technology to manufacture siege weapons. For the Yunnan War, the craftsmen in the city worked overtime and rushed to manufacture countless siege weapons. The 3 armies all brought a large number of siege weapons to support the war. Even so, the smoothness of the process exceeded everyone's expectations. Because it was too smooth, Hua Tsubing became more cautious, afraid of being ambushed by the Allies. The only normal thing was probably the problem of rations. The granaries of the cities captured along the way were all emptied without exception, or simply turned into a pile of charcoal. What's more, even the surplus food of the commoners was seized ahead of time, and no one knew where it went. This situation wasn't limited to the main city. It was the same for all the subsidiary cities. Other than a bit of rations from the commoners' homes, there wasn't a single grain of extra food in the entire Dongchuan Prefecture. Before the war, the General of Military Affairs had already ordered that all departments were forbidden from plundering the commoners' rations. The General of Military Affairs, Du Ruhui, warned the generals before the war, "No matter how hungry you are, you can't rob the commoners' rations even if you're willing to drink the northwest wind. No matter who disobeys this order, they will be severely punished." The goal of the Yunnan War was only to destroy Yunnan City-State, not to destroy the local economy, livelihood, and people's hearts. If the army really did as they pleased, the destructive power would be terrifying. Even if the following officials spent several times more effort, they still wouldn't be able to win back the people's hearts. Everywhere the army passed, not a single grain was harvested. They could only rely on the grain transport team to provide food. In this week, with the help of the aerial team, the 3 intelligence agencies conducted a carpet search in Yunnan province. Strangely, they still hadn't found any traces of the Allies. It was as if the 200,000-strong army had never appeared in Yunnan province. The reality was that according to the Shanghai Guards and the Black Snake Guards, the Yan-Huang Alliance's armies had indeed been transferred away without a doubt. At this moment, the Allied forces were like a layer of dense fog that enveloped the skies above Yunnan province, making this war of the century even more confusing. Under such circumstances, how could Hua Tsubing take such a risk? The First Legion didn't dare to split up and fight on multiple fronts, so they just attacked city by city. Apart from that, Hua Tsubing also paid great attention to the protection of the supply routes. He specifically transferred 2 cavalry brigades from the 1st Division to assist in supervising the transportation of supplies. With the strength of the 1st Legion, even if they encountered 200,000 Allied troops, they wouldn't be in too much of a mess if they were prepared. Therefore, Hua Tsubing's strategy was to guard against surprise attacks, but at the same time, he did not want to miss a good opportunity. The 1st Legion set off a siege war in Dongchuan County according to its predetermined trajectory. It swept through the entire Dongchuan County at the speed of 2 cities in 3 days. In view of the strange situation of the Right Army, the commander of the Western Punitive Expedition, Bai Qi, ordered the Middle Army and the Left Army to slow down their attacks and preserve their strength as a deterrent. December 15, Dongchuan County. In just 10 days, the entire Dongchuan County had basically fallen under the iron hooves of the 1st Legion of the Imperial Guard. All that was left was a lone city in the north, Yongren City. Yongren City was located at the junction of Yunnan Province and Sichuan Province. Across the border, about 200 miles away, was the famous city of steel and the capital of vanadium and titanium, Panzihua. Panzihua's iron ore resources accounted for more than 70% of the Sichuan province's mineral reserve. It was one of the 4 largest iron mining areas in China. Its associated titanium reserves were ranked first in the world, and its associated vanadium reserves were ranked third in the world. The Panzihua area in the game was located within the territory of Swordsman City. The iron ore industry naturally became one of the pillars of Swordsman City's industries. However, due to the inconvenience of transporting iron ore, it was very difficult to export and unprofitable. Currently, there were no trains in the game, so it was impossible to transport iron ore in large quantities over long distances. This was especially true on land, where the transportation of large quantities of mineral resources was a huge problem. Therefore, the Lord of Swordsman City, Feng Qingyang, could only sit on a mountain of treasure without being able to convert it into actual gold coins. At most, he could rely on the astonishing iron ore reserves to develop his territory's military industry. However, due to the lack of weapons and equipment manufacturing technology, Swordsman City's military industry was also half dead. Because of this, Swordsman City was in a relatively difficult situation among the members of the Yan-Huang Alliance. Swordsman City did not have much of a presence in major battles, including affairs in the wilderness. As one of the giants of the Yan-Huang Alliance, Feng Qingyang's fame was not only comparable to that of Di Chun and Lord Chunshan, but also that of Battle Wolf and Xiong Ba. It could even be said that the rising star of the alliance, Wandering Huan, had a higher appearance rate than Feng Qingyang. Because of this, Feng Qingyang had completely given up on the idea of managing his territory and turned his attention to the martial arts world. He wholeheartedly wanted to cooperate with Liu Bei's Shu Han imperial court to achieve a win-win situation. That morning, Huatsubing led the Imperial Guards to a location 10 miles outside of Yongren City. "Sir, it seems like the Alliance has no intention of setting up an ambush in Dongchuan Prefecture. We were worried for nothing." The one who spoke was the newly appointed commander of the 1st Division of the Imperial Guard's 1st Legion, Ma Ting. As a general of the Eastern Han Dynasty, Ma Ting was naturally respectful to the famous Western Han Dynasty general, Huatsubing. He did not look down on him or slack off even though he was older than him. According to historical records, Huatsubing was Ma Ting's ancestor. Ma Ting might be dissatisfied if it was someone else commanding the army. However, Huatsubing commanded the army and Ma Ting was very obedient. He was also very respectful to Huatsubing and had an indescribable sense of closeness in his heart. Not only that, Ma Ting also warned the two brothers, Ma Chao and Ma Xiu, to be more respectful to the commander of the Imperial Guards. This made Ma Chao, who had rushed to take up the post, depressed. His father was treating him like a child. Ma Ting was only respectful to Huatsubing, but Ma Chao was worshipping him. Ma Mengqi was well aware that he was brave but lacking in resourcefulness. On the other hand, Huatsubing was a god of his generation. Which young general of the great Han Empire did not worship Huatsubing? Idolatry and idolatry were not exclusive to modern people. Huatsubing rode on his warhorse and looked at Yongren City in the distance. There was a trace of doubt in his eyes. Along the way, the expected Allied army did not appear. From the looks of it, Yunnan City had abandoned Dongchuan Commandery. Perhaps in the eyes of the lords of the city-state, the isolated Dongchuan Commandery did not have much strategic value. They might as well cut off one of their limbs to revive the whole game. However, Huatsubing's intuition told him that things were not so simple. This feeling of unease had persisted until today, and the source of it had not been found. Could Yongren City be a trap? The intelligence from the military intelligence showed that there were no signs of troops stationed in Yongren City. Even the areas near the city had been carefully checked by the spies from the military intelligence, but there was still no one. If the Allied army really wanted to launch a surprise attack, the only possibility was that they had teleported here in the middle of attacking the city. If that was the case, the Allied army of 200,000 soldiers would not be able to pose much of a threat to the 1st Legion. Huatsubing calmed himself down and turned to Ma Ting. "It's best not to let down our guard, but we can't stop moving forward. Send the order to the entire army to prepare for the attack." As a soldier, Huatsubing would not give up on attacking Yongren City because of a trace of unease before he had the support of accurate information. As long as they could take down this city, the entire Dongchuan Commandery would fall into the hands of Shanghai City. If that happened, it would have a very positive impact on the entire war situation in Yunnan. The Imperial Guards would be the greatest contributor to the war. Following the military order, the war drums sounded and the siege began again. The main force of the attack was still 2 heavy infantry divisions of the mountain barbarians, and 2 cavalry divisions to guard the flanks. The cavalry division of the Ironback Cavalry was in charge of the rear. At around 10 in the morning, with the help of the siege weapons, the Mountain Barbarian Division successfully reached the foot of the city wall. Next was the most difficult siege. For the Mountain Barbarian soldiers, everything was a walk in the park. If everything went smoothly, the ordinary city in front of them would fall before sunset. Right at this moment, an unforeseen event occurred. The transportation array in the center of Yongren City suddenly flashed with a dazzling blue light, and an endless stream of soldiers walked out of the transportation array and gathered in the square. After each team was assembled, they began to rush to the major city gates under the leadership of the team leader. In less than 10 minutes, the spy from the Military Intelligence Division hiding in Yongren City received the news. It was too late to rely on hummingbirds to deliver the message. The spy risked being exposed and pulled the signal flare. With a whoosh, the red signal flare, which meant that there was an ambush, rose into the air and exploded high in the sky. Outside the city, Huatsubing stared at the signal flare that had yet to disperse. Not only was he not nervous, but he also breathed a sigh of relief. The unknown always made people anxious. Once the Allied forces appeared and the veil of mystery was lifted, Huatsubing had nothing to fear. Pass down the order, have the front-line troops withdraw. Since the Allied forces had appeared, Huatsubing would not think that it would be easy to take down Yongren City. Even if they attacked the city, it would be a chaotic battle. For a mixed infantry and cavalry unit like the 1st Legion, a chaotic battle inside the city was extremely disadvantageous. Therefore, Huatsubing was prepared to meet the legendary 200,000 Allied forces outside the city. Even if he could not win, he was confident that he could delay the Allied forces until reinforcements arrived. Don't forget, the 2nd Legion of the Imperial Guards in Lingxi City was on standby. What Huatsubing did not know was that a disaster was quietly befalling the Imperial Guards. The entire situation on the battlefield would be reversed because of this battle. Chapter 773. The one that appeared in Yongren City was not 200,000 Allied troops, but 150,000 Allied troops. This time they also played a trick. In the eyes of the Military Intelligence Department, there were 200,000 Allied troops stationed in the camp, but in reality, there were only 50,000 Allied troops in the camp. The remaining 150,000 troops had already quietly moved and hidden. Although the Allied forces were formed from the armies of the various territories, the city lords could not grasp every move of the Allied forces in time, let alone directly command the Allied forces. The daily operations of the Allied forces were handled by the commander of the Allied forces appointed by the city-states, and battle orders were issued by the Joint Conference of the City Lords. To be precise, it was issued by the rotating chairman of the Joint Conference of the City Lords. The current commander of the Allied forces in Yunnan City-State was the famous general of the Sui dynasty, Zhang Xutuo. Zhang Xutuo was considered a pillar of the Sui dynasty, and he led his troops to suppress Yang Qiong, Wang Bo, and other rebel armies. Qin Qiong, Luo Shixin, and other young generals had once served under Zhang Xutuo. In AD 616, Zhang Xutuo fought with the Wagong army and was surrounded by Di Rang, Li Mi, Su Shiji, and Wang Bodong. He dismounted and died in battle at the age of 52. When the soldiers under him learned of his death, they cried for several days. With the death of the famous general Zhang Xutuo, the Sui dynasty seemed to have lost the last straw to protect the country. They were no longer able to suppress the rebel armies everywhere, and finally walked towards destruction. In addition to his bravery in battle, the impression that Zhang Xutuo left on the world was loyalty, unwavering loyalty. In the chaotic times of the last years of the Sui dynasty, tyrants rose everywhere, and they divided their territories. Only Zhang Xutuo was loyal to the Sui dynasty, and he would rather die in battle than surrender to the Wagong army. It was no wonder that Zhang Xutuo was so loved by the soldiers. Such a loyal and righteous person was truly rare in the world. In view of the special nature of the Yunnan battle, coupled with the lessons learned from Lingnan City-State, the Joint Conference voted that Qin Fun would be the rotating chairman during the war. This also meant that the spies planted by Shanghai City in Yunnan City-State would not be able to grasp the Allied forces' whereabouts in time. If they asked without permission, there was even a risk of being exposed. By the time the spies of the city-state obtained the information and passed it to the Black Snake Guards, and then to the Imperial Guards, the Allied forces had already teleported to Yongren City and completed the Great Heaven and Earth shift. As for the legendary 200,000 Allied troops, there was still no trace. The spies stationed in the city were unable to distinguish whether the army that came from the teleportation formation belonged to the Allied forces or Allied forces. Subconsciously and naturally, they belonged to the Alliance. This also misled Huatsubing, who was outside the city. The Allied forces had teleported over to annihilate the Imperial Guards, not to help defend Yongren City. Therefore, after the 150,000-strong coalition army assembled in Yongren City, they did not stay in the city. Just as Huatsubing had predicted, the Allied army marched out of the city one by one and set up a battle formation outside the city, confronting the 1st Imperial Guard Legion that had already retreated. Outside Yongren City, a murderous aura filled the air. 70,000 versus 150,000. To Huatsubing, this was not a problem. If they really had to fight, Huatsubing was confident that he would win even without waiting for reinforcements. The strange thing was that, after the Allied forces got into formation, they did not rush to attack. It was as if they were waiting for something. The atmosphere on the battlefield became more and more solemn and suffocating. Just as Huatsubing was feeling puzzled and was about to take the initiative to attack, the sound of horse hooves suddenly came from the northern horizon of Yongren City. Even the ground was shaking. As far as the eye could see, a long black line appeared on the horizon. The black line moved southward at a speed visible to the naked eye, gradually forming a black tide that stretched as far as the eye could see. This black tide was the 200,000 Allied forces. The Allied forces were not hidden in Yunnan Province, but in Shu Province, north of Yongren City, within the territory of Swordsman City. It was no wonder that the 3 major intelligence agencies could not find any traces of the Allied forces, no matter how hard they searched. No one would have guessed that the Allied forces were not even in the province. Because Yongren City was located at the northern border, the Allied forces had long set up an ambush point. No matter which legion Shanghai City sent to attack Dongchuan Prefecture, they would be ambushed by the Allied forces. The 200,000 Allied forces, together with the 150,000 strong Allied forces that were teleported over, amounted to a total of 350,000 soldiers. They were about to launch an earth-shattering attack on the Imperial Guards. 70,000 versus 350,000. No matter how strong the Imperial Guards were, they would not be able to withstand a 5 times difference in military strength. Looking at the approaching black tide, Huatsubing's face was ashen. The Allied forces had a magnificent lineup of generals, led by Divine General Wu Qi, with Lien Pu and Tian Dan as his deputies. The Yen-Wang alliance had indeed gone all out this time, sending the most powerful generals in their respective territories. What appeared on the horizon was only the 100,000 cavalrymen of the Allied forces. The remaining 100,000 infantrymen had already stealthily made a detour to the back of the Imperial Guards. As such, they formed a huge encirclement. The 350,000 soldiers had trapped the 1st Regiment of the Imperial Guards in the wilderness outside of Yongren City. This place was destined to become a humiliation for the Imperial Guards. "Sir, lead the troops and break out." Ma Ting's expression was grave as he looked at the enemy troops surrounding them from all directions. Huatsubing said expressionlessly, "How do we break out? The cavalrymen can break out, but can the mountain barbarians? We can't care so much now. Escaping is better than being wiped out, right?" Ma Ting was not afraid of death, but he did not want Huatsubing to do anything stupid. No matter how hard the Imperial Guards fought, they would not be able to win. The only chance now was to break out of the encirclement before it was completely formed. "Sir, we can't hesitate anymore." Seeing that the enemy was getting closer, Ma Ting became anxious. At that moment, the 3 regiment commanders, Shi Hu, Lei Jingtian, and Shan Zhu, rushed over. The 3 young warriors knelt on one knee and cupped their fists. "Sir, please leave first. We will be responsible for bringing up the rear." Seeing this, Huatsubing's expression was complicated. He said in a low voice, "Do you know what this means? It is our honor to die on the battlefield." As the representative, Shi Hu said, "I believe that you will not let our sacrifice be in vain. You will definitely avenge us." Hearing this, Huatsubing could not even bear to look at the general's eyes. He looked forward and said slowly, "I, Huatsubing, hereby swear that if I don't avenge this, I am not a man." His voice was not loud, but it was full of the will to destroy everything. Fate was so cruel. When the Imperial Guards were the closest to the glory, they gave them a fatal blow. Huatsubing collected his emotions and began to plan a way to break out. The armored beast regiment in the rear became the vanguard, responsible for tearing apart the enemy's defensive line. The two mountain barbarian heavy infantry regiments formed a formation on the spot, responsible for delaying the enemy in front and buying time for the main army to retreat. In addition, a cavalry regiment was to be left behind to cooperate with the infantry to protect the two flanks. Otherwise, the mountain barbarian infantry would not be able to hold on for long under the pincer attack from three sides. Therefore, the only regiment that could retreat was a cavalry regiment. The old general, Ma Ting, volunteered and chose to stay. He would lead the 1st Regiment to assist the two mountain barbarian regiments in restraining the enemy. The 1st Regiment was the oldest cavalry regiment in Shanghai City. It was formed from Luo Shixin's regiment and was also the 1st regiment in the territory to pass the army's trial. The regiment had a glorious history, and was practically the incarnation of the Imperial Guards. Huatsubing was speechless when he saw this. Ma Ting was the first to suggest a retreat, but he chose to stay at the critical moment. The old general's resolve moved Huatsubing. "Sir, let this old general's bones boil again," Ma Ting said. Huatsubing did not say anything and nodded silently. A tragic feeling spread through the entire army, and it could not be contained. No one knew how many Imperial Guards would be able to see tomorrow's sun after sunset. As a divine general, Huatsubing's mental fortitude was extremely strong. Once the plan was decided, Huatsubing automatically discarded all unnecessary emotions and feelings. Like a cold machine, he began to operate at full force. His mission was to bring as many soldiers as possible out of the encirclement. When the invincible ironclad beast regiment charged at the Allied infantry phalanx that had already surrounded them from behind, the Imperial Guard's bloody escape route was revealed. The ferocious ironclad beasts were each equipped with specially made armor. Like steel chariots, they charged at the Allied army with indomitable will. This was the most valiant cavalry regiment in the wilderness. On the Lingnan battlefield, the ironclad beasts struck fear into the enemy's hearts. On the Yunnan battlefield, they were equally valiant as they resolutely defended the Imperial Guard's honor. Could you imagine what would happen if rows of steel chariots charged into the crowd? Such was the scene outside Yongren City. Under the leadership of Shanju, the ironclad beast regiment abandoned all defenses with the belief that they would die. There was only one thought in their minds. Charge, charge, charge again. The Allied soldiers in the front row were instantly turned into minced meat and flattened by the ironclad beasts like they were made of paper. It was really flattened. The huge phalanx of infantry suddenly disappeared. Such power was truly terrifying. If the Allied army was not made up of equally elite troops, and the commander of the army was not a peerless general, just this one move would probably completely crush the Allied army's will to fight. Stop them. It was not easy for the Allied army to set up such a shocking trap. How could they allow the Imperial Guards to escape? The army that covered the mountains and plains rushed toward the ironclad beast regiment like a black tide. The scene in front of them was very much like the pinnacle of a battle between a colony of ants and an elephant. Although the elephant was strong, it was ultimately outnumbered. After paying a huge price, the Allied army finally stopped the momentum of the ironclad beast regiment's charge. Giant ironclad beasts fell into the sea of people and were separated and surrounded, unable to escape. Destruction was only a matter of time. To Shanghai City, every ironclad beast was extremely precious. They did not expect that they would all die here. Huatsubing's eyes were bloodshot. He personally led the 5th Division and launched the strongest charge along the bloody path that the ironclad Beast Regiment had opened up, preparing to break out of the encirclement. Regardless of whether or not they could successfully break out, this was the darkest day for the Imperial Guards. Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience. Chapter 774. The path of the 1st Imperial Guard Corps to break out of the encirclement was a tragic and stirring path paved with blood. Along the way there was dedication and sacrifice. There was separation in life and separation in death. People kept falling and people kept breaking out. On the battlefield of swords and sabers, no individual could decide their own fate alone. The soldiers could only unite as one and work together as a team to decide their own survival. On the vast battlefield, there were scenes of breaking out, interception, encirclement, and counter-encirclement. The slaughter shook the heavens, and blood flowed like rivers. From time to time, the sorrowful cries of the ironback beasts could be heard. The battlefield was filled with dust and blood. It was like a furnace of heaven and earth, refining the fate of hundreds of thousands of people. Huatsubing personally led the 5th Division forward. With the Ironback Division leading the way, and the Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Division and Matting Division providing cover, they finally broke out of the Allied defense line. We can't let Huatsubing escape. The Allied forces did not give up and sent out their most elite cavalry to chase after him. The cavalry chasing him were all riding elite Mongolian warhorses, which were comparable to the Imperial Guard's horses. Huatsubing had no choice but to activate the specialty, cavalry battle. Cavalry battle increases the cavalry's morale by 30, increases the cavalry's movement speed by 50, increases the cavalry's lethality by 35, and increases the cavalry's endurance by 40. The specialty of the divine generals was to go against the natural order, so they could instantly pull away from the enemy. But the Allied forces were not to be trifled with. They were like a pack of hunting dogs, chasing after the Imperial Guard relentlessly, as if they would not stop until they killed them. The Imperial Guard Legion ran for a day and a night. Other than a 3-hour emergency rest at night, they did not get off their horses at all. Thus, they finally got rid of the enemy's pursuit. The desperation and helplessness of the process could not be described with words. Dongchuan Prefecture, in the nameless wilderness. Stop advancing and rest in place. Huatsubing gave the second order to rest because he noticed that even with the toughness of the horses, they were foaming at the mouth and could not hold on any longer. Whoosh! The army that was advancing at high speed immediately stopped. Their movements were still uniform, and there was not the slightest bit of deviation. The soldiers did not care about their bleeding wounds. They quietly took out the water bottles from their backpacks and fed the warhorses water before handing them a ration pill. Warhorses were the lifeblood of knights, even more important than their wives. Seeing their beloved horses foaming at the mouth, the knights felt their hearts ache. As the strongest army in the territory, the Imperial Guards were treated the best. Take the rations pills for example. Among all the field armies, only the Imperial Guards had rations pills as standard supplies. The other armies did not have such treatment. It was also thanks to the military rations pills that the 5th Division had been able to last until now. During their escape, the soldiers didn't even have time to get off their horses to eat, let alone cook. As for the cities that had already been conquered, they didn't dare to enter. Who knew if there was an ambush inside? When they attacked Dongchuan County, in order to end the battle quickly, the Imperial Guards rushed to the next city after dealing with the defenders of each city. They didn't have the time to exercise any effective control over the city. At this time, the news of the Imperial Guard's defeat at the front line had probably already spread to all the major cities in Dongchuan Prefecture. Who knew what the people in the city were thinking? At that time, the situation on the battlefield was urgent. In order to successfully break out of the encirclement, the Imperial Guard's rations, supplies, siege equipment, and even 2P1 cannons were all abandoned on the battlefield. During the escape, the troops responsible for transporting the rations suffered as well. Not only were large amounts of rations intercepted by the enemy, but even the peasants who were transporting the rations were slaughtered. The Allied forces were a pack of hungry wolves. They were even willing to attack the civilians. When the guards in charge of transporting the rations saw this, they gritted their teeth and ordered the peasants to disperse and escape into the wilderness of Dongchuan Prefecture. This ambush was undoubtedly a calamity to Shanghai City. Huotsubing looked at the defeated soldiers around him with a tired expression. Even for a divine general like Huotsubing, it was a huge burden to constantly activate cavalry battle. "Count how many people are left," Huotsubing ordered his adjutant. "Yes, sir." Soon, the situation of each division was summarized. Although the iron-armored beast division was fierce, their endurance was not as good as the warhorses. Even if they managed to break out of the encirclement, they were all killed by the enemy cavalry. The matting division, which was responsible for providing cover, was directly surrounded. Not a single one of them managed to escape. In the end, only about 10,000 people managed to break out of the encirclement. That was not even enough to form a division. Huotsubing was silent when he heard this. He did not know how to answer to the emperor. Although this ambush was a failure and there was also the negligence of the intelligence department, as the commander of the Left Army, he was also responsible for not doing a detailed investigation before attacking Yongren City. Otherwise, even if the Allied forces were hiding in Shu, they would not be able to suddenly cross the border and surround the Imperial Guards. It was really embarrassing that the Imperial Guard's hidden sentries were all eliminated by the enemy. Returned to Lingxi City. After resting for 2 hours, Huotsubing ordered again. They could not stay in Dongchuan Prefecture any longer. Now, they could only take it one step at a time and rush back to the headquarters before making further plans. After a while, the vast army of cavalry disappeared into the wilderness. Dongchuan Prefecture, Yongren City. That evening, the battle on the main battlefield had come to an end. The battlefield was littered with corpses and rivers of blood. In this battle, the Allied forces and Allied forces had paid a price in order to defeat the 1st Imperial Guard Division. In the end, the Allied forces lost more than 30,000 people, while the Allied forces lost more than 40,000 people. The Allied forces' losses were mainly due to the Armored Beast Division's breakout at the rear, while the Allied forces' losses were basically caused by the 2 Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Divisions and the Matting Division. Of course, their final results were also quite generous. In this battle, they killed more than 45,000 Imperial Guards and captured 15,000 people, which was considered to have achieved their target. Even the old General Matting had died on the battlefield. The Imperial Guards were a very fierce army. Even under those circumstances, they were not willing to surrender. The prisoners of war were basically captured when they were unable to resist. Therefore, the prisoners were mainly cavalry. In the later stages of the war, the mountain barbarian soldiers basically went berserk and disregarded life and death. In the end, the 2 Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Divisions were left with less than 2,000 people captured. The captured Mountain Barbarians also suffered from the side effects of going berserk. Their bodies were weak, which was why the enemy succeeded. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for the Mountain Barbarians to survive. The Mountain Barbarians were just that fanatical. They would rather die in battle than be captured, just like their ancestor Qiyu. Although he was crude, he was a true man. The Allied forces' commander-in-chief Wu Qi looked at the devastated battlefield and could not help but sigh. The Shanghai City Imperial Guards really live up to their reputation. In such a disadvantageous situation, the Imperial Guards still managed to kill the enemy at such a shocking rate. Although they had won this battle, they had killed 800 of the enemy and lost 1,000 of their own. Therefore, after the battle, there was no decisive change in the strength of the two sides. This result was completely out of Wu Qi's expectations. Before the battle, who would have thought that it would end like this? Of course, they had won after all. The greatest significance of this battle was not the difference in strength, but the impact it had on the morale of both sides. Think about it, even the strongest imperial guards of Shanghai City had been defeated by them. To the Allied forces, what did the other armies of Shanghai City have to fear? In this way, they had grasped the strategic initiative. On the contrary, the army of Shanghai City, which had always been said to be invincible, had encountered the greatest Waterloo of their lives. It would be difficult for them to adjust in a short period of time. The battle on the main battlefield was starting to become advantageous to Yunnan city-state. "Let's go back," Wu Qi ordered. After hurriedly cleaning up the battlefield, the Allied forces did not stay in Yongren City for long. They immediately teleported to Tengchong City. This arrangement showed that Yunnan city-state did not want to follow Shanghai City's rhythm in terms of strategy. In the previously set main battlefield, there were only 50,000 Allied troops left. He didn't know what they were up to. After the army retreated, the construction of Dongchuan Prefecture was temporarily handed over to the nearby Swordsman City. According to the agreement, Swordsman City would station 40,000 troops to take over the defense of the entire Dongchuan Prefecture. Transferring Dongchuan Prefecture was one of the agreements signed between Yunnan City-State and Yan-Huang Alliance. The entire battle plan had already been implemented a month ago. Apart from that, Swordsman City also had another mission, which was to be responsible for guarding the prisoners of war. According to the agreement, all the prisoners of war from the Battle of Yunnan would be divided by Yan-Huang Alliance. Yunnan City-State did not have the authority to accept prisoners of war. Yan-Huang Alliance's style of doing things was still as tyrannical as ever. After the army retreated, the bustling Yongren City returned to peace. Other than the piles of bones outside the city, it was as if nothing had happened. Everyone knew that this place was destined to become famous in the wilderness because of this ambush. The news of Shanghai City's 1st Imperial Guard Corps being ambushed outside of Yongren City and almost completely annihilated quickly spread throughout the wilderness, shocking the world. According to some people, this was the worst defeat that Shanghai City had ever suffered since they established their foothold in the wilderness. Moreover, they had lost the most famous Imperial Guard Corps, so it was even more of a topic. The entire forum was bustling with noise and excitement. Even players from other regions were quietly paying attention to this unprecedented battle. For a moment, all the major media outlets were criticizing Shanghai City. Many experts predicted that the arrogant Shanghai City would suffer a huge setback in the Yunnan battlefield. Not to mention whether Shanghai City could take down Yunnan City-State. It was also a question of whether they could retreat unscathed. The haze that shrouded Yunnan welcomed the sunlight for the first time. The dawn of victory seemed to be waving at Yunnan City-State. In the eyes of the experts, the direction of the battle was already clear. Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience. Chapter 775. The 19th of December, Lingxi City. The remnants of the Imperial Guards who had traveled day and night finally returned to Lingxi City, ready to meet the Emperor. Moreover, 3 days ago, the intelligence of the Imperial Guard army being ambushed and even the detailed battle report had already been presented to Ouyang Shua's desk, causing Ouyang Shua to be extremely furious to the point he smashed the table into pieces on the spot, and his expression was terrifyingly gloomy. When the Emperor was angry, the heavens and earth changed color. Lingxi City was immediately shrouded in a dark cloud. Everyone was cautious, afraid of angering the Emperor. Black Snake, who had rushed back, almost committed suicide in front of the Emperor. Because of the intelligence error, the Imperial Guards were ambushed, and even the entire war in Yunnan experienced a shocking reversal. Black Snake and the other intelligence chiefs were truly to blame. Black Snake stood outside the emperor's courtyard for a full day and night, but was not able to see the emperor. He only received 4 words: "Atone for your crimes." Black Snake heard this and bowed deeply outside the courtyard, turned around and disappeared into the night. Mountain Sea Guards Commander Shun Buhai and the military intelligence chief Cobra were also punished. This time, the 3 intelligence chiefs were disgraced and in a sorry state. The intelligence network that the territory had spent a lot of money to build actually failed at a critical moment. It was really ironic. In order to quell the impact of the war in Dongchuan County, Ouyang Shua had to urgently summon Du Ruhui, Zhao Kuo, and Chen Gong to Lingxi City. At the same time, he kept in touch with Bai Qi, Jiasu, and Shi Wansui through letters. They busied themselves for a full 2 days, making adjustments to the battle plan that they had previously formulated. The news that the Alliance and the Allied Army had teleported to Tengchong City was finally received by the Black Snake Guard. In response to this, Bai Qi proposed, and with Ouyang Shua's approval, the battle strategy of the center and left armies was adjusted. The center army formed by the Shi Wansui and Zhang Liao armies would slowly advance, maintaining pressure on Tengchong City. At the same time, the left army led by Bai Qi stepped up their occupation of Mengding County. More importantly, in response to the alliance's possible teleportation tactic, Bai Qi formulated a black chess plan based on the previous tactic to counter the teleportation tactic. Currently, the entire military arrangement revolved around the black chess plan. It was precisely because of this that Ouyang Shua wanted Black Snake to atone for his crimes and ensure that the black chess plan could be successfully implemented. Upon learning that the Imperial Guards had returned, Ouyang Shua, who had been expressionless for the past few days, walked out of the courtyard and personally rushed to the city gates to welcome them. "My lord!" Upon seeing Ouyang Shua, Huatsubing immediately dismounted from his horse and knelt down on one knee. He cupped his fists and was speechless for a moment. Then, he said sorrowfully, "I have failed the Lord's trust, please punish me." Ouyang Shua stepped forward to support Huatsubing and said, "General, this defeat is not your fault. My lord, this general is guilty." Huatsubing, on the other hand, could not overcome this hurdle, and his face was full of self-blame. He didn't expect that the first defeat of his life would come so quickly, and he was caught unprepared. This was a huge blow to the proud Huatsubing. Ouyang Shua resolutely helped Huatsubing up. "Get up first." As he spoke, Ouyang Shua raised his head and looked at the soldiers behind Huatsubing. After rushing all the way, almost all of the soldiers who broke out of the encirclement were wounded. Hunger, exhaustion, pain, and so on constantly attacked the soldiers' bodies, making them look terrible. Even so, they were still unable to defeat them. What really made them anxious was the rebuke from the Lord. The Imperial Guards were the sharpest sword in the Lord's hand, and the territory's everlasting glory. But at this moment they had fallen. If the Lord revealed a disappointed expression, it would be enough to make the soldiers die of shame. If it wasn't for the fact that they had to rush back to Lingxi City to report, some of the soldiers would have even committed suicide along the way to atone for their sins. Seeing the Lord look over, the soldiers avoided his gaze, and some even lowered their heads, not daring to meet his eyes. Ouyang Shua saw this and his expression was sorrowful. He noticed the anxiety and embarrassment in the soldiers' eyes, and his heart ached as he looked at their lifeless eyes. At this moment, the Lord's unique, magnetic and infectious voice rang in the soldiers' ears. "My sons, one defeat is not enough to defeat the Imperial Guards. I have always seen your bravery and fearlessness, and you are worthy of the name and glory of the Imperial Guards." There was a commotion in the crowd, and some soldiers turned their heads to look at the Lord with the eyes of a child looking at his father. "My sons, raise your heads, stick out your chests, and look straight ahead. The glory that has been lost can only be found on the battlefield. Hold the spears in your hands tightly, and continue to defend the glory of the Imperial Guards. More and more soldiers raised their heads and looked at the Lord. At this moment, they were like abandoned children who had suddenly found their way back home, and their expressions were complicated. "My sons, welcome home." Ouyang Shua smiled slightly, and it was like the sun was shining warmly into the soldiers' broken hearts, baptizing their fatigue, and soothing their anxious and uneasy hearts. Faint sounds of sobbing came from the troops, low, suppressed, and relieved. The men secretly used their dirty sleeves to wipe their tears, leaving a stain at the corner of their eyes, but the expressions on their faces were incomparably cheerful and relaxed. The group of fearful and uneasy soldiers suddenly found a direction to move forward again. "Lord!" The Imperial Guards knelt on the ground, all of them excited. "We will forever follow you, Lord." The Lord's words made the soldiers feel that no matter how much suffering they had to endure, it was all worth it. The Imperial Guards would never admit defeat. Bai Hua and the others who accompanied them looked at the scene in front of them, and their expressions were filled with emotion. How could Di Chen and the others know what kind of spirit Shanghai City truly relied on for its rise? As long as this spirit was not extinguished, Shanghai City would never fall. That night, Ouyang Shua did not hold a banquet for the Imperial Guards. He knew that the Imperial Guards were a group of arrogant men, and they were unwilling to accept any gifts after their defeat. Forcing a banquet would only make things more awkward for them. Ouyang Shua only ordered the quartermaster to send them the usual supplies, and he did not give them any extra care. Of course, during the day, Ouyang Shua specially went back to Shanghai City. At the Guanlin Temple, Ouyang Shua used a king-level general soul to resurrect the deceased General Ma Ting. As soon as he walked out of the Guanlin Temple, Ma Ting's first request was to return to the army. Ouyang Shua was slightly surprised when he saw this. From the looks of it, Hua Tsubing, the commander of the Imperial Guards, had completely convinced this old general. Even so, Ouyang Shua did not agree to Ma Ting's request. Firstly, Ma Ting was old, and he had just experienced death once. It was not appropriate for him to enter the battlefield again. When he heard the news of his father's death, Ma Chao, who had already led his troops to Lingxi City, became anxious. If Ouyang Shua had not stepped forward to restrain him, Ma Chao would have led his troops to reinforce Dongchuan Prefecture. Secondly, he wanted Ma Ting to cooperate with the territory's strategic arrangements. Ouyang Shua instructed Ma Ting to frequently appear in Shanghai City, and it would be best if he could act sorrowful to confuse the enemy spies in Shanghai City. Ma Ting did not understand at first, but when he saw the scroll that Ouyang Shua handed him, he suddenly understood. "Don't worry, my lord. I will cooperate well." To be honest, a veteran like Ma Ting was still a little fearful after dying once. If he rushed to the battlefield again, he might suffer from some kind of mental illness. Moreover, Ma Ting did not want to distract Ma Chao and the others. When Ouyang Shua saw this, he nodded in satisfaction. This old general was still very reasonable. When he left Shanghai City, Ouyang Shua brought someone with him. He was Lu Bu, who was still studying in the military's martial arts lecture hall. Lu Bu would temporarily replace Ma Ting and command the 1st Division of the Imperial Guards. December 20th, Lingxi City's outer military camp. At the Imperial Guards encampment, 10,000 Imperial Guards had already gathered at the drill ground under Hua Tsubing's command. Yesterday, the Lord had instructed him to give the soldiers a surprise. At around 8 in the morning, Ouyang Shua arrived at the drill ground punctually with Lu Bu. "My lord!" Hua Tsubing rushed over. He knew what a surprise was, so he was especially excited. Ouyang Shua smiled and did not say anything. He took out a scroll from his storage pouch. It was the Group Resurrection Scroll that he had obtained when he looted Sirius Island in Somalia. Name: Group Resurrection Scroll. Type: Special Item. Restriction: a one-time use item. Only usable by players and lords. Attribute: A certain amount of gold coins can be used to resurrect the dead. There is no upper limit to the number of resurrected soldiers. Below 10,000 will cost 10 gold coins per person. Every 10,000 increase in the upper limit will cost 10 gold coins per person. Note: senior generals and above, including historical generals, will not be able to be resurrected. Ouyang Shua did not expect that he would have to use this scroll so soon. The Imperial Guards were the strongest army in the territory. The Armored Beast Division and the Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Division were existences that could not be replicated. As such, the scroll could be considered to be used to its fullest potential. Ouyang Shua opened the scroll, and a system notification rang in his ears. System notification: player not wearing anything has been detected to use the special item, Group Resurrection Scroll. Please select the resurrection target. Shanghai City Imperial Guards 1st Legion. System notification: the resurrection target has been locked. Checking system notification. Shanghai City Imperial Guards 1st Legion has been detected to have died outside Yongrin City 5 days ago. Please select the number of people to resurrect. Resurrect them all. Ouyang Shua did not hesitate. System notification: resurrecting people will cost 128.64 million gold coins. Would you like to resurrect them immediately? Resurrect them immediately. Even if it cost more than 1,000,000 gold coins, Ouyang Shua would still resurrect them. System notification: resurrection request confirmed. Resurrect immediately. As soon as he finished speaking, a dazzling white light flashed in the drill ground. When the white light dissipated, all the Imperial Guards who had died in the Battle of Yongrin City appeared, except for the high-ranking generals. Ouyang Shua looked at these officers and soldiers and said with gratification, "Welcome home, my sons." Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience. Chapter 776. P.S. Sorry for the delay. For the Imperial Guards, the scene in front of them would be unforgettable for the rest of their lives. Right in front of their eyes, their fallen comrades were once again alive and well on the drill ground. It was difficult for anyone who wasn't from the military to understand such emotions. The fallen Imperial Guards had been miraculously resurrected. "You're back, comrade." The soldiers on the drill ground couldn't control their emotions and hugged each other. Many of these resurrected comrades had died in battle while covering their retreat. When they saw them again, the soldiers of the 5th Division finally felt a little better. They were even more grateful to the Emperor who had made this happen. Unfortunately, Shi Hu, Lei Jingtian, Shan Zhu, and Shi Bao, the 4 high-ranking native generals, were not among the resurrected. Ouyang Shua had no way of knowing if these 4 generals had already died or were unfortunately captured. Ouyang Shua hoped that they had been captured. If that was the case, there would at least be hope for them to return to the army. If they had died in battle, Ouyang Shua would be powerless. As a historical general, Ouyang Shua received a system notification when Ma Ting died. However, there was no news from Shi Hu and the other 2. The spies hidden in Yongrin City were moving around to confirm whether they were dead or alive. After the Imperial Guards had calmed down, Ouyang Shua announced a few temporary appointments on the spot. He appointed Lu Bu as the temporary commander of the 1st Division of the Imperial Guards. At the same time, he ordered the deputy commanders of the 2nd and 3rd Divisions to temporarily take the position of commander. Since the deputy commander of the 4th Division was Shi Bao, Ouyang Shua could only appoint a brigade marshal to temporarily take the position of commander. An army couldn't be without a general, so this was an expedient measure. As for the shortage of 15,000 soldiers who had been captured, Ouyang Shua didn't transfer personnel from the independent division of the Imperial Guards to fill it. This position was reserved for them. Ouyang Shua believed that even with the loss of 15,000 soldiers, the 1st Division of the Imperial Guards was still a powerful army that could fight head-on with any other army. Especially after experiencing such an unforeseen event, the soldiers' fighting spirit was even higher. After making the personnel arrangements, Ouyang Shuo was about to get up and leave the barracks, but Hua Tsubing stopped him. Seeing that the first regiment of the Imperial Guards had been resurrected, Hua Tsubing immediately asked for permission to fight. "My lord, I am confident that I can retake Dongchuan Prefecture within 5 days. Please allow me to do so." "No." Ouyang Shuo shook his head decisively. "Jun Shang." Hua Tsubing was a little confused, and there was a look of grievance in his eyes. He thought that His Majesty no longer trusted the Imperial Guards and him, the commander of the Imperial Guards. "Let's talk here." Ouyang Shuo turned around and left the drill grounds when he saw this, and he arrived at a corner of the barracks. The personal guards that accompanied him immediately spread out and guarded the surroundings, and they forbade anyone from approaching. Ouyang Shuo smiled and explained, "It's not that I don't believe you. Think about it, in the eyes of the enemy, the 1st Imperial Guard Corps is no longer part of the fighting order. You are now a surprise troop that can kill the enemy at the critical moment. As for Dongchuan County, it was nothing. If Swordsman City wants to occupy it, then let them occupy it. As long as we win on the main battlefield, taking back Dongchuan Prefecture is just a matter of minutes." The 10 days of battle by the Imperial Guards were not completely useless. First, they annihilated the local garrison, and second, they destroyed all the transmission arrays except for the one in Yongren City. In this way, it would be impossible for the enemy to do anything in Dongchuan Prefecture. Not attacking Dongchuan Prefecture now was to avoid alerting the enemy and prevent Swordsman City from sending more troops to Dongchuan Prefecture, which would threaten the safety of Kunming Prefecture. Secondly, it could also make the Allied forces and Yunnan city-state lower their guard. It was precisely because of this that Ouyang Shuo focused his attention on Mengding Prefecture and Tingyue Prefecture. As long as Bai Qi's black chess plan could be successfully implemented, Shanghai City would have a great chance of winning. The 1st Imperial Guard Corps that had just been resurrected played an important role in the black chess plan. Ouyang Shuo briefly explained the black chess plan to Hua Tsubing, and the more Hua Tsubing listened, the brighter his eyes became. In the end, his eyes were bursting with brilliance. Hua Tsubing took a deep breath and slightly calmed himself down. He cupped his fists and said, "I understand. I will follow the arrangements of the High Command." A murderous intent rose in his eyes, and it was directed at the Allied forces and Allied forces that had tricked them. The next time they met, they would have to settle the score. Seeing that Hua Tsubing understood, Ouyang Shuo was relieved. Finally, he said, "After all, the soldiers of the 1st Imperial Guard Corps have just experienced such a drastic change. I'm afraid they are still not used to it. As the commander of the Imperial Guard Corps, you can stay in the barracks for the time being and help the soldiers adjust. Remember, you have to be in your best state to face the most difficult combat missions. The best steel should be used at the most critical moment." "Yes, sir." Hua Tsubing solemnly saluted. Through this incident, Hua Tsubing suddenly realized that he was closer to the Emperor. He actually felt a little like he was in front of Emperor Wu of Han. Ouyang Shuo smiled and turned to leave. Tingyue Prefecture, Tengchong City. Di Chen, Lord Chunshan, and the other members of the Yan-Huang Alliance, the lords of Yunnan City-State represented by Qin Fun, Wu Qi, Tian Dan, Lian Pe, Zhang Xutuo, and other generals gathered together. The purpose of this meeting was to discuss the next step of the military operation. The success of the ambush in Yongren City undoubtedly made everyone excited. Even Di Chen and the others looked a little excited. However, the words of the commander of the Allied forces, Wu Qi, poured a bucket of cold water on everyone present. "Sirs, we can't celebrate too early. The main force of Shanghai City's army is still intact, and the offensive and defensive balance between the enemy and us has not been broken. Shanghai City has suffered a loss, and they will definitely be more cautious. A lion is already difficult to deal with, and a cautious lion is even more troublesome. Therefore, the success of the next round of the plan is the key to this battle. The Battle of Yongren City is only the prologue to the war, and it can't be considered as the foundation for the overall war. If we want to win the war, we must be prepared to pay a greater price. Otherwise, the enemy could turn the tables at any time. When Wu Qi said, "Pay a price," a few people in the hall had a strange expression on their faces. They were the lords of Dongchuan Prefecture, and now they were generals without an army. Although the city-state and the Yan-Huang alliance had already promised to compensate them before the battle, the city-state and the Yan-Huang alliance had already promised to compensate them. However, the premise of all compensation was that they won the war. Don't be fooled by the media, constantly bad-mouthing Shanghai City. They knew very well how powerful Shanghai City was. Just as Wu Qi said, losing the Imperial Guards was not enough to turn the tide of the war. In Wu Qi's words, they had to be prepared to make a greater sacrifice. As for who to sacrifice? The former lords of Dongchuan Prefecture looked at the lords of Mengding Prefecture with deep meaning. When the Yunnan city-state was negotiating with the Yan-Huang alliance, they were already mentally prepared. Even with the help of the Yan-Huang alliance, it was impossible for the city-state to retreat from the iron hooves of Shanghai City's army. The only question was how much they had to pay, and whose interests they had to sacrifice. As the number one lord of the city, Qin Feng had obviously played a trick on this matter, and had probably secretly formed a tacit understanding with Di Chun and the others. Otherwise, the alliance and the allied forces would not have teleported to Tengchong City. After all, Mengding Prefecture was the main battlefield for both sides. It was obvious that Qin Feng's thoughts had changed on this matter. When the lords of Mengding Prefecture saw this, their expressions became somewhat ugly, and some of their gazes were already wandering. They knew what Wu Qi meant when he said a greater price. After Dongchuan Prefecture, Mengding Prefecture would probably become the next sacrifice. The Yan-Huang alliance had a good plan. Dongchuan Prefecture had been destroyed by Shanghai City, and Swordsman City had picked up a ready-made bargain. They just didn't know what they were going to do in Mengding Prefecture. But no matter what they were going to do, it would not be good news for the lords of Mengding Prefecture. As expected, when Wu Qi revealed the battle plan, the lords of Mengding Prefecture's faces immediately turned pale, like a group of pitiful worms that had been abandoned by their troops and thrown into the wilderness. A gust of cold wind blew in the closed meeting hall for no reason, making it chilly. The following week, the battlefield in Yunnan was somewhat dull. Bai Qi's left army did not progress smoothly. Although the Allied forces and Allied forces were concentrated in Tingyue Prefecture, they had not completely given up on Mengding Prefecture. Every city had their own garrison and Allied forces as reinforcements. What was even more hateful was that according to Wu Qi's battle plan, before Bai Qi's army arrived, every territory would gather all the armed forces of the main city and its subsidiary cities and reorganize them. This included not only the territory's garrison, but also the local troops. It even included bailiffs, guards recruited by merchants and aristocratic families, students from dojos, wandering swordsmen, and so on. In Wu Qi's words, as long as they had the strength to fight, they would not let a single one of them go. Not only that, the territory also issued a temporary recruitment order, gathering all the young adults of the territory and giving them weapons and equipment to form a militia. Other labor was also conscripted to assist the army in defending the cities. In one sentence, Wu Qi's plan was, every citizen is a soldier and fight to the end. This was really too terrifying. Every time the left army attacked a city, they had to put in a lot of effort. Every time the enemy took the advantage of defending the city, they would do their best to effectively kill the left army. That posture was truly horrifying. Apart from direct attacks, there were also a large number of guerrillas who caused trouble for the grain transport team. Along the way, the left army suffered heavy losses. Helpless, Bai Qi could only transfer the reserve force of the Leopard Army's 3rd Corps to the front line as reinforcement. Only then did they slightly increase the speed of their attacks. Even so, their progress was far from what they had expected, and they suffered heavy casualties. In just a week, the left army had lost more than 30,000 soldiers. Even so, they were only able to take down less than half of Mengding Prefecture. It was now the 4th year of Gaia. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.